Chapter 22, showing how the countersign was respected at the Bastille. Fouquet tore along as fast as his horses could drag him. On his way, he trembled with horror at the idea of what had just been revealed to him. What must have been, he thought, the youth of those extraordinary men who, even as age is stealing fast upon them, are still able to conceive such gigantic plans and carry them through without a tremor? At one moment, he could not resist the idea that all Aramis had just been recounting to him was nothing more than a dream, and whether the fable itself was not the snare, so that when Fouquet arrived at the Bastille, he might possibly find an order of arrest, which would send him to join the dethroned king. Strongly impressed with this idea, he gave certain sealed orders on his route, while fresh horses were being harnessed to his carriage. These orders were addressed to M. d'Artagnan, and to certain others whose fidelity to the king was far above suspicion. "In this way," said Fouquet to himself, "prisoner or not, I shall perform the duty that I owe my honor. The orders will not reach them until after my return, if I should return free, and consequently they will not have been unsealed. I shall take them back again. If I am delayed, it will be because some misfortune will have befallen me, and in that case assistance will be sent for me as well as the king." Prepared in this manner, the superintendent arrived at the Bastille. He had traveled at the rate of 5 leagues and a half the hour. Every circumstance of delay which Aramis had escaped in his visit to the Bastille befell Fouquet. It was useless giving his name, equally useless his being recognized. He could not succeed in obtaining an entrance. By dint of entreaties, threats, commands, he succeeded in inducing a sentinel to speak to one of the subalterns, who went and told the major. As for the governor, they did not even dare disturb him. Fouquet sat in his carriage at the outer gate of the fortress, chafing with rage and impatience, awaiting the return of the officers, who at last reappeared with sufficiently sulky air. "Well," said Fouquet impatiently, "what did the major say?" "Well, monsieur," replied the soldier, "the major laughed in my face. He told me that M. Fouquet was at Vaux, and that even were he at Paris, M. Fouquet would not get up at so early an hour as the present." "Mordieu, you are an absolute set of fools," cried the minister, darting out of the carriage, and before the subaltern had time to shut the gate, Fouquet sprang through it and ran forward in spite of the soldier, who cried out for assistance. Fouquet gained ground, regardless of the cries of the man, who, however, having at last come up with Fouquet, called out to the sentinel of the second gate, "Look out! Look out! Sentinel!" The man crossed his pike before the minister, but the latter, robust and active, and hurried away, too, by his passion, wrested the pike from the soldier and struck him a violent blow on the shoulder with it. The subaltern, who approached too closely, received a share of the blows as well. Both of them uttered loud and furious cries, at the sound of which the whole of the first body of the advanced guard poured out of the guardhouse. Among them there was one, however, who recognized the superintendent and who called, "Monseigneur! Ah, Monseigneur! Stop, you fellows." And he effectually checked the soldiers, who were on the point of revenging their companions. Fouquet desired them to open the gate, but they refused to do so without the countersign. He desired them to inform the governor of his presence, but the latter had already heard the disturbance at the gate. He ran forward, followed by his major and accompanied by a picket of 20 men, persuaded that an attack was being made on the Bastille. Baisemeaux also recognized Fouquet immediately and dropped the sword he bravely had been brandishing. "Ah, Monseigneur," he stammered, "how can I excuse?" "Monsieur," said the superintendent, flushed with anger and heated by his exertions, "I congratulate you. Your watch and ward are admirably kept." Baisemeaux turned pale, thinking that this remark was made ironically, and pretended a furious burst of anger. But Fouquet had recovered his breath, and, beckoning the sentinel and the subaltern, who were rubbing their shoulders, towards him, he said, "There are 20 pistoles for the sentinel and 50 for the officer. Pray receive my compliments, gentlemen. I will not fail to speak to His Majesty about you. And now, M. Baisemeaux, a word with you." And he followed the governor to his official residence, accompanied by a murmur of general satisfaction. Baisemeaux was already trembling with shame and uneasiness. Aramis's early visit, from that moment, seemed to possess consequences which a functionary such as Baisemeaux was perfectly justified in apprehending. It was quite another thing, however, when Fouquet, in a sharp tone of voice and with an imperious look, said, "You have seen M. d'Herblay this morning?" "Yes, Monseigneur." "And are you not horrified at the crime of which you have made yourself an accomplice?" "Well, thought Baisemeaux, good so far." And then he added aloud, "But what crime, Monseigneur, do you allude to?" "That for which you can be quartered alive. Monsieur, do not forget that. But this is not a time to show anger. Conduct me immediately to the prisoner." "To what prisoner?" said Baisemeaux, trembling. "You pretend to be ignorant? Very good. It is the best plan for you, perhaps, for if, in fact, you were to admit your participation in such a crime, it would be all over with you. I wish, therefore, to seem to believe in your assumption of ignorance. I entreat you, Monseigneur." "That will do. Lead me to the prisoner." "To Marchiali? Who is Marchiali?" "The prisoner who was brought back this morning by M. d'Herblay." "He is called Marchiali?" said the superintendent, his conviction somewhat shaken by Baisemeaux's cool manner. "Yes, Monseigneur. That is the name under which he was inscribed here." Fouquet looked steadily at Baisemeaux, as if he would read his very heart, and perceived, with that clear-sightedness most men possess who are accustomed to the exercise of power, that the man was speaking with perfect sincerity. Besides, in observing his face for a few moments, he could not believe that Aramis would have chosen such a confidant. "It is the prisoner," said the superintendent to him, "whom M. d'Herblay carried away the day before yesterday?" "Yes, Monseigneur." "And whom he brought back this morning?" added Fouquet, quickly, for he understood immediately the mechanism of Aramis's plan. "Precisely, Monseigneur. And his name is Marchiali, you say?" "Yes, Marchiali. If Monseigneur has come here to remove him, so much the better, for I was going to write about him." "What has he done, then?" "Ever since this morning he has annoyed me extremely. He has had such terrible fits of passion, as almost to make me believe that he would bring the Bastille itself down about our ears." "I will soon relieve you of his possession," said Fouquet. "Ah, so much the better. Conduct me to his prison." "Will Monseigneur give me the order?" "What order?" "An order from the king." "Wait until I sign you one." "That will not be sufficient, Monseigneur. I must have an order from the king." Fouquet assumed an irritated expression. "As you are so scrupulous," he said, "with regard to allowing prisoners to leave, show me the order by which this one was set at liberty." Baisemeaux showed him the order to release Selden. "Very good," said Fouquet, "but Selden is not Marchiali." "But Marchiali is not at liberty, Monseigneur. He is here. But you said that M. d'Herblay carried him away and brought him back again." "I did not say so." "So surely did you say it, that I almost seem to hear it now." "It was a slip of my tongue, then, Monseigneur." "Take care, and Baisemeaux, take care." "I have nothing to fear, Monseigneur. I am acting according to the very strictest regulation." "Do you dare to say so?" "I would say so in the presence of one of the apostles. M. d'Herblay brought me an order to set Selden at liberty. Selden is free. I tell you that Marchiali has left the Bastille. You must prove that, Monseigneur." "Let me see him." "You, Monseigneur, who govern this kingdom, know very well that no one can see any of the prisoners without an express order from the king. M. d'Herblay has entered, however. That remains to be proved, Monseigneur. M. de Baisemeaux, once more I warn you to pay particular attention to what you are saying. All the documents are there, Monseigneur. M. d'Herblay is overthrown." "Overthrown? M. d'Herblay? Impossible. You see that he has undoubtedly influenced you." "No, Monseigneur. What does, in fact, influence me is the king's service. I am doing my duty. Give me an order from him, and you shall enter. Stay, M. le Gouverneur, I give you my word that if you allow me to see the prisoner, I will give you an order from the king at once. Give it to me now, Monseigneur. And that if you refuse me, I will have you and all your officers arrested on the spot. Before you commit such an act of violence, Monseigneur, you will reflect," said Baisemeaux, who had turned very pale, "that we will only obey an order signed by the king, and that it will be just as easy for you to obtain one to see Marchiali as to obtain one to do me so much injury. Me too. who am perfectly innocent. True, true, cried Fouquet furiously. Perfectly true. De Bezmos, he added, in a sonorous voice, drawing the unhappy governor towards him. Do you know why I am so anxious to speak to the prisoner? No, Monseigneur, and allow me to observe that you are terrifying me out of my senses. I am trembling all over. In fact, I feel as though I were about to faint. You will stand a better chance of fainting outright, Monsieur Bezmos, when I return here to head of 10,000 men and 30 pieces of cannon. Good heavens! Monseigneur, you are losing your senses. When I have roused the whole population of Paris against you and your accursed towers, and have battered open the gates of this place, and hanged you to the topmost tree of yonder pinnacle. Monseigneur, for pity's sake, I give you 10 minutes to make up your mind, added Fouquet in a calm voice. I will sit down here in this armchair and wait for you. If, in 10 minutes' time, you still persist, I leave this place, and you may think me as mad as you like. Then you shall see. Bezmos stamped his foot on the ground like a man in a state of despair, but he did not reply a single syllable, whereupon Fouquet seized a pen and ink and wrote, Order for M. Louis Prevet de Marchands to assemble the municipal guard and to march upon the Bastille on the king's immediate service. Bezmos shrugged his shoulders. Fouquet wrote, Order for the Duc de Bouillon and M. Louis Prince de Condé to assume the command of the Swiss guards, of the king's guards, and to march upon Bastille on the king's immediate service. Bezmos reflected. Fouquet still wrote, Order for every soldier, citizen, or gentleman to seize and apprehend, wherever he may be found, Le Chevalier d'Herblay, Yves de Vannes, and his accomplices, who are, first, M. de Bezmos, governor of the Bastille, suspected of the crimes of high treason and rebellion. Stop, Monseigneur, cried Bezmos. I do not understand a single jot of the whole matter, but so many misfortunes, even were it madness itself that had set them at their awful work, might happen here in a couple of hours, that the king, by whom I must be judged, will see whether I have been wrong in withdrawing the countersign before this flood of imminent catastrophes. Come with me to the keep, Monseigneur. You shall see Marchiali. Fouquet darted out of the room, followed by Bezmos as he wiped the perspiration from his face. What a terrible morning, he said. What a disgrace for me. Walk faster, replied Fouquet. Bezmos made a sign to the jailer to precede them. He was afraid of his companion, which the latter could not fail to perceive. A truce to this child's play, he said, roughly. Let the man remain here. Take the keys yourself, and show me the way. Not a single person, do you understand, must hear what is going to take place here. Ah, said Bezmos, undecided. Again, cried M. Fouquet. Ah, say no at once, and I will leave the Bastille and will myself carry my own dispatches. Bezmos bowed his head, took the keys, and unaccompanied, except by the minister, ascended the staircase. The higher they advanced up the spiral staircase, the more clearly did certain muffled murmurs become distinct appeals and fearful imprecations. What is that? Asked Fouquet. That is your Marchiali, said the governor. This is the way these madmen scream. And he accompanied that reply with a glance more pregnant with injurious allusion, as far as Fouquet was concerned, than politeness. The latter trembled. He had just recognized in one cry more terrible than any that had preceded it, the king's voice. He paused on the staircase, snatching the bunch of keys from Bezmos, who thought this new madman was going to dash out his brains with one of them. Ah, he cried, M. d'Herblay did not say a word about that. Give me the keys at once, cried Fouquet, tearing them from his hand. Which is the key of the door I am to open? That one. A fearful cry, followed by a violent blow against the door, made the whole staircase resound with the echo. Leave this place, said Fouquet to Bezmos, in a threatening tone. I ask nothing better, murmured the latter to himself. There will be a couple of madmen face to face, and the one will kill the other, I am sure. Go, repeated Fouquet. If you place your foot on this staircase before I call you, remember that you shall take the place of the meanest prisoner in the Bastille. This job will kill me. I am sure it will, muttered Bezmos, as he withdrew with tottering steps. The prisoner's cries became more and more terrible. When Fouquet had satisfied himself that Baisemeaux had reached the bottom of the staircase, he inserted the key in the first lock. It was then that he heard the hoarse, choking voice of the king, crying out in a frenzy of rage, "Help! Help! I am the king." The key of the second door was not the same as the first, and Fouquet was obliged to look for it on the bunch. The king, however, furious and almost mad with rage and passion, shouted at the top of his voice, "It was M. Fouquet who brought me here. Help me against M. Fouquet. I am the king. Help the king against M. Fouquet." These cries filled the minister's heart with terrible emotions. They were followed by a shower of blows leveled against the door, with a part of the broken chair with which the king had armed himself. Fouquet at last succeeded in finding the key. The king was almost exhausted. He could hardly articulate distinctly as he shouted, "Death to Fouquet! Death to the traitor Fouquet!" The door flew open. Chapter 23. The King's Gratitude. The two men were on the point of darting toward each other when they suddenly and abruptly stopped, as a mutual recognition took place, and each uttered a cry of horror. "Have you come to assassinate me, monsieur?" said the king, when he recognized Fouquet. "The king in this state," murmured the minister. Nothing could be more terrible indeed than the appearance of the young prince at the moment Fouquet had surprised him. His clothes were in tatters, his shirt, open and torn to rags, was stained with sweat and with the blood which streamed from his lacerated breast and arms. Haggard, ghastly pale, his hair in disheveled masses, Louis XIV presented the most perfect picture of despair, distress, anger, and fear combined that could possibly be united in one figure. Fouquet was so touched, so affected and disturbed by it, that he ran towards him with his arms stretched out and his eyes filled with tears. Louis held up the massive piece of wood of which he had made such a furious use. "Sire," said Fouquet, in a voice trembling with emotion, "do you not recognize the most faithful of your friends?" "A friend, you!" repeated Louis, gnashing his teeth in a manner which betrayed his hate and desire for speedy vengeance. "The most respectful of your servants," added Fouquet, throwing himself on his knees. The king let the rude weapon fall from his grasp. Fouquet approached him, kissed his knees, and took him in his arms with inconceivable tenderness. "My king, my child," he said, "how you must have suffered." Louis, recalled to himself by the change of situation, looked at himself, and ashamed of the disordered state of his apparel, ashamed of his conduct, and ashamed of the air of pity and protection that was shown towards him, drew back. Fouquet did not understand this movement. He did not perceive that the king's feeling of pride would never forgive him for having been a witness of such an exhibition of weakness. "Come, sire," he said, "you are free." "Free," repeated the king. "Oh, you set me at liberty, then, after having dared to lift up your hand against me." "You do not believe that," exclaimed Fouquet indignantly. "You cannot believe me to be guilty of such an act." And rapidly, warmly even, he related the whole particulars of the intrigue, the details of which are already known to the reader. While the recital continued, Louis suffered the most horrible anguish of mind, and when it was finished, the magnitude of the danger he had run struck him far more than the importance of the secret relative to his twin brother. "Monsieur," he said suddenly to Fouquet, "this double birth is a falsehood. It is impossible. You cannot have been a dupe of it." "Sire, it is impossible, I tell you, that the honor, the virtue of my mother could be suspected, and my first minister has not yet done justice on the criminals." "Reflect, sire, before you are hurried away by anger," replied Fouquet. "The birth of your brother." "I have only one brother, and that is monsieur. You know it as well as myself. There is a plot, I tell you, beginning with the governor of the Bastille. Be careful, sire, for this man has been deceived as everyone else is by the prince's likeness to yourself." "Likeness? Absurd. This Marchiali must be singularly like your majesty to be able to deceive everyone's eye," Fouquet persisted. "Ridiculous." "Do not say so, sire. Those who have prepared everything in order to face and deceive your ministers, your mother, your officers of state, the members of your family, must be quite confident of the resemblance between you." "But where are these persons, then?" murmured the king. "At Vaux." "At Vaux! And you suffer them to remain there. My most instant duty appeared to me to be your majesty's release. I have accomplished that duty, And now, whatever your majesty may command shall be done. I await your orders." Louis reflected for a few moments. "Muster all the troops in Paris," he said. "All the necessary orders are given for that purpose," replied Fouquet. "You have given orders!" exclaimed the king. "For that purpose, yes, sire. Your majesty will be at the head of 10,000 men in less than an hour. And with these troops," he said, "we shall go at once and besiege in your house the rebels who by this time will have established and entrenched themselves therein." "I should be surprised if that were the case," replied Fouquet. "Why?" "Because their chief, the very soul of the enterprise, having been unmasked by me, the whole plan seems to me to have miscarried." "You have unmasked this false prince also?" "No, I have not seen him." "Whom have you seen, then?" "The leader of the enterprise, not that unhappy young man. The latter is merely an instrument, destined through his whole life to wretchedness, I plainly perceive." "Most certainly. It is l'Abbé de Herblay, Yves de Vannes." "Your friend?" "He was my friend, sire," replied Fouquet, nobly. "An unfortunate circumstance for you," said the king, in a less generous tone of voice. "Such friendships, sire, had nothing dishonorable in them so long as I was ignorant of the crime. You should have foreseen it. If I am guilty, I place myself in your majesty's hands." "Ah, Monsieur Fouquet, it was not that I meant," returned the king, sorry to have shown the bitterness of his thought in such a manner. "Well, I assure you that, notwithstanding the mask with which the villain covered his face, I had something like a vague suspicion that he was the very man. But with this chief of the enterprise there was a man of prodigious strength, the one who menaced me with a force almost Herculean. What is he? It must be his friend the Baron du Vallon, formerly one of the Musketeers." "The friend of D'Artagnan? The friend of the Comte de la Fere?" "Ah!" exclaimed the king, as he paused at the name of the latter. "We must not forget the connection that existed between the conspirators and M. de Bragelonne." Sire, do not go too far. M. de la Fere is the most honorable man in France. Be satisfied with those whom I deliver up to you." "With those whom you deliver up to me, you say? Very good, for you will deliver up those who are guilty to me." "What does your majesty understand by that?" inquired Fouquet. "I understand," replied the king, "that we shall soon arrive at Vaux with a large body of troops, that we will lay violent hands upon that nest of vipers, and that not a soul shall escape." "Your majesty will put these men to death," cried Fouquet, "to the very meanest of them." "Oh, sire, let us understand one another, Monsieur Fouquet," said the king, haughtily. "We no longer live in times when assassination was the only and the last resource kings held in reservation at extremity. No, heaven be praised. I have parliaments who sit and judge in my name, and I have scaffolds on which supreme authority is carried out." Fouquet turned pale. "I will take the liberty of observing to your majesty that any proceedings instituted respecting these matters would bring down the greatest scandal upon the dignity of the throne. The august name of an of Austria must never be allowed to pass the lips of the people accompanied by a smile. Justice must be done, however, monsieur." "Good, sire, but royal blood must not be shed upon a scaffold." "The royal blood? You believe that?" cried the king with fury in his voice, stamping his foot on the ground. "This double birth is an invention, and in that invention particularly do I see M. de Herblay's crime. It is a crime I wish to punish rather than the violence or the insult, and punish it with death, sire." "With death? Yes, monsieur, I have said it." "Sire," said the superintendent with firmness, as he raised his head proudly, "your majesty will take the life, if you please, of your brother Philippe of France. That concerns you alone, and you will doubtless consult the Queen Mother upon the subject. Whatever she may command will be perfectly correct. I do not wish to mix myself up in it, not even for the honor of your crown. But I have a favor to ask of you, and I beg to submit it to you." "Speak," said the king, in no little degree agitated by his minister's last words. "What do you require?" "The pardon of M. de Herblay and of M. du Vallon." "My assassins?" "Two rebels, sire, that is all." "Oh, I understand, then. You ask me to forgive your friends." "My friends," said Fouquet, deeply wounded. Your friends, certainly, but the safety of the state requires that an exemplary punishment should be inflicted on the guilty. I will not permit myself to remind your majesty that I have just restored you to liberty and have saved your life. Monsieur, I will not allow myself to remind your majesty that had M. d'Herblay wished to carry out his character of an assassin, he could very easily have assassinated your majesty this morning in the forest of Senart, and all would have been over. The king started. A pistol bullet through the head, pursued Fouquet, and the disfigured features of Louis XIV, which no one could have recognized, would be M. d'Herblay's complete and entire justification. The king turned pale and giddy at the bare idea of the danger he had escaped. If M. d'Herblay, continued Fouquet, had been an assassin, he had no occasion to inform me of his plan in order to succeed. Freed from the real king, it would have been impossible in all futurity to guess the false. And if the usurper had been recognized by Anne of Austria, he would still have been her son. The usurper, as far as M. d'Herblay's conscience was concerned, was still a king of the blood of Louis XIII. Moreover, the conspirator, in that course, would have had security, secrecy, impunity. A pistol bullet would have procured him all that. For the sake of heaven, sire, grant me his forgiveness. The king, instead of being touched by the picture, so faithfully drawn in all details, of Aramis's generosity, felt himself most painfully and cruelly humiliated. His unconquerable pride revolted at the idea that a man had held suspended at the end of his finger the thread of his royal life. Every word that fell from Fouquet's lips, and which he thought most efficacious in procuring his friend's pardon, seemed to pour another drop of poison into the already ulcerated heart of Louis XIV. Nothing could bend or soften him. Addressing himself to Fouquet, he said, "I really don't know, monsieur, why you should solicit the pardon of these men. What good is there in asking that which can be obtained without solicitation? I do not understand you, sire. It is not difficult, either. Where am I now?" "In the Bastille, sire." "Yes, in a dungeon. I am looked upon as a madman, am I not?" "Yes, sire." "And no one is known here but Marchiali?" "Certainly." "Well, change nothing in the position of affairs. Let the poor madman rot between the slimy walls of the Bastille, and M. d'Herblay and M. du Vallon will stand in no need of my forgiveness. Their new king will absolve them. Your majesty does me a great injustice, sire, and you are wrong," replied Fouquet dryly. "I am not child enough, nor is M. d'Herblay silly enough to have omitted to make all these reflections. And if I had wished to make a new king, as you say, I had no occasion to have come here to force open the gates and doors of the Bastille to free you from this place. That would show a want of even common sense. Your majesty's mind is disturbed by anger. Otherwise you would be far from offending groundlessly the very one of your servants who has rendered you the most important service of all." Louis perceived it had gone too far, that the gates of the Bastille were still closed upon him, whilst by degrees the floodgates were gradually being opened, behind which the generous-hearted Fouquet had restrained his anger. "I did not say that to humiliate you, heaven knows, monsieur," he replied. "Only you are addressing yourself to me in order to obtain a pardon, and I answer according to my conscience. And so, judging by my conscience, the criminals we speak of are not worthy of consideration or forgiveness." Fouquet was silent. "What I do is as generous," added the king, "as what you have done, for I am in your power. I will even say it is more generous, inasmuch as you place before me certain conditions upon which my liberty, my life, may depend, and to reject which is to make a sacrifice of both." "I was wrong, certainly," replied Fouquet. "Yes, I had the appearance of extorting a favor. I regret it, and entreat your majesty's forgiveness." "And you are forgiven, my dear Monsieur Fouquet," said the king with a smile which restored the serene expression of his features, which so many circumstances had altered since the preceding evening. "I have my own forgiveness," replied the minister, with some degree of persistence. "But M. d'Herblay and M. du Vallon? They will never obtain theirs, as long as I live," replied the inflexible king. "Do me the kindness not to speak of it again. Your majesty shall be obeyed, and you will bear me no ill will for it." "Oh, no, sire, for I anticipated the event." "You had anticipated that I should refuse to forgive those gentlemen?" "What do you mean to say?" cried the king, surprised. M. de Herblay came, as may be said, to deliver himself into my hands. M. de Herblay left to me the happiness of saving my king and my country. I could not condemn M. de Herblay to death, nor could I, on the other hand, expose him to your majesty's justifiable wrath. It would have been just the same as if I had killed him myself. Well, and what have you done? Sire, I gave him de Herblay the best horses in my stables in 4 hours, start over all those your majesty might, probably, dispatch after him. Be it so, murmured the king. But still, the world is wide enough and large enough for those whom I may send to overtake your horses, notwithstanding the 4 hours' start which you have given to M. de Herblay. In giving him these 4 hours, sire, I knew I was giving him his life, and he will save his life. In what way? After having galloped as hard as possible, with a 4 hours' start, before your musketeers, he will reach my Chateau of Belle-Isle, where I have given him a safe asylum. That may be, but you forget that you have made me a present of Belle-Isle, but not for you to arrest my friends. You take it back again, then? As far as that goes, yes, sire. My musketeers shall capture it, and the affair will be at an end. Neither your musketeers nor your whole army could take Belle-Isle, said Fouquet coldly. Belle-Isle is impregnable. The king became perfectly livid. A lightning flash seemed to dart from his eyes. Fouquet felt that he was lost, but he is not one to shrink when the voice of honor spoke loudly within him. He bore the king's wrathful gaze. The latter swallowed his rage, and after a few moments' silence, said, "Are we going to return to Vaux?" "I am at your majesty's orders," replied Fouquet with a low bow. "But I think that your majesty can hardly dispense with changing your clothes previous to appearing before your court." "We shall pass by the Louvre," said the king. "Come." And they left the prison, passing before Baisemeaux, who looked completely bewildered as he saw Marchiali once more leave, and, in his helplessness, tore out the major portion of his few remaining hairs. It was perfectly true, however, that Fouquet wrote and gave him an authority for prisoners' release, and that the king wrote beneath it, "Seen and approved Louis," a piece of madness that Baisemeaux, incapable of putting two ideas together, acknowledged by giving himself a terrible blow on the forehead with his own fist. Chapter 24. The False King. In the meantime, usurped royalty was playing out its part bravely at Vaux. Philippe gave orders that for his petit Lèvre de Grande's entrees, already prepared to appear before the king, should be introduced. He determined to give this order notwithstanding the absence of M. de Herblay, who did not return. Our readers know the reason, but the prince, not believing that absence could be prolonged, wished, as all rash spirits do, to try his valor and his fortune far from all protection and instruction. Another reason urged him to this, and if Austria was about to appear, the guilty mother was about to stand in the presence of her sacrificed son. Philippe was not willing, if he had a weakness, to render the man a witness of it before whom he was bound henceforth to display so much strength. Philippe opened his folding doors, and several persons entered silently. Philippe did not stir whilst his valets de chamber dressed him. He had watched, the evening before, all the habits of his brother, and played the king in such a manner as to awaken no suspicion. He was thus completely dressed in hunting costume when he received his visitors. His own memory and the notes of Aramis announced everybody to him, first of all and of Austria, to whom Monsieur gave his hand, and then Madame Madame de Saint-Aignan. He smiled at seeing these countenances, but trembled on recognizing his mother, that still so noble and imposing figure, ravaged by pain, pleaded in his heart the cause of the famous queen who had immolated a child of reason's estate. He found his mother still handsome. He knew that Louis XIV loved her, and he promised himself to love her likewise, and not to prove a scourge to her old age. He contemplated his brother with a tenderness easily to be understood. The latter had usurped nothing, had cast no shades athwart his life. A separate tree, he allowed the stem to rise without heeding its elevation or majestic life. Philippe promised himself to be a kind brother to this prince, who required nothing but gold to minister to his pleasures. He bowed with a friendly air to Saint-Aignan, who was all reverences and smiles, and trembling held out his hand to Henrietta, his sister-in-law, whose beauty struck him, but he saw in the eyes of that princess an expression of coldness which would facilitate, as he thought, their future relations. How much more easy, thought he, it will be to the brother of that woman than her gallant. If she evinces toward me a coldness that my brother could not have for her, but which is imposed upon me as a duty. The only visit he dreaded at this moment was that of the queen. His heart, his mind, had just been shaken by so violent a trial that, in spite of their firm temperament, they would not, perhaps, support another shock. Happily, the queen did not come. Then commenced, on the part of Austria, a political dissertation upon the welcome Fouquet had given to the House of France. She mixed up hostilities with compliments addressed to the king and questions as to his health, with little maternal flatteries and diplomatic artifices. "Well, my son," said she, "are you convinced with regard to M. Fouquet?" "Saint Aignan," said Philippe, "have the goodness to go and inquire after the queen." At these words, the first Philippe had pronounced aloud, the slight difference that there was between his voice and that of the king was sensible to maternal ears, and Anne of Austria looked earnestly at her son. Saint Aignan left the room, and Philippe continued, "Madam, I do not like to hear Fouquet spoken of. You know I do not, and you have even spoken well of him yourself." "That is true. Therefore I only question you on the state of your sentiments with respect to him." "Sire," said Henrietta, "I, on my part, have always liked M. Fouquet. He is a man of good taste, a superior man, a superintendent who is never sordid or niggardly," added Monsieur, "and who pays in gold all the orders I have on him." "Every one in this thinks too much of himself, and nobody for the state," said the old queen. M. Fouquet, it is a fact, M. Fouquet is ruining the state." "Well, mother," replied Philippe, in rather a lower key, "do you likewise constitute yourself the buckler of M. Colbert?" "How is that?" replied the old queen, rather surprised. "Why, in truth," replied Philippe, "you speak that just as your old friend Madame de Chevreuse would speak." "Why do you mention Madame de Chevreuse to me?" said she. "And what sort of humor are you in today towards me?" Philippe continued, "Is not Madame de Chevreuse always in league against somebody? Has not Madame de Chevreuse been to pay you a visit, mother?" "Monsieur, you speak to me now in such a manner that I can almost fancy I am listening to your father." "My father did not like Madame de Chevreuse, and had good reason for not liking her," said the prince. "For my part, I like her no better than he did, and if she thinks proper to come here as she formerly did, to sow divisions and hatreds under the pretext of begging money, why—" "Well, what?" said Anne of Austria, proudly, herself provoking the storm. "Well," replied the young man firmly, "I will drive Madame de Chevreuse out of my kingdom, and with her all who meddle with its secrets and mysteries." He had not calculated the effect of this terrible speech, or perhaps he wished to judge the effect of it, like those who, suffering from a chronic pain, and seeking to break the monotony of that suffering, touch their wound to procure a sharper pang. Anne of Austria was nearly fainting. Her eyes, open but meaningless, ceased to see for several seconds. She stretched out her arms towards her other son, who supported and embraced her without fear of irritating the king. "Sire," murmured she, "you are treating your mother very cruelly." "In what respect, madam?" replied he. "I am only speaking of Madame de Chevreuse. Does my mother prefer Madame de Chevreuse to security of the state and of my person? Well then, madam, I tell you Madame de Chevreuse has returned to France to borrow money, and that she addressed herself to M. Fouquet to sell him a certain secret." "A certain secret!" cried Anne of Austria. "Concerning pretended robberies that Monsieur le Surintendant had committed, which is false," added Philippe. M. Fouquet rejected her offers with indignation, preferring the esteem of the king to complicity with such intriguers. Then Madame de Chevreuse sold the secret to M. Colbert, and as she is insatiable, and was not satisfied with having extorted 100,000 crowns from a servant of the state, she has taken a still bolder flight, in search of surer sources of supply. Is that true, madam?" "You know all, sire," said the queen, more uneasy than irritated. "Now," continued Philippe, "I have good reason to dislike this fury, who comes to my court to plan the shame of some and the ruin of others. If heaven has suffered certain crimes to be committed, and has concealed them in the shadow of its clemency, I will not permit Madame de chivalrous, to counteract the just designs of fate. The latter part of the speech had so agitated the Queen Mother that her son had pity on her. He took her hand and kissed it tenderly. She did not feel that in that kiss, given in spite of repulsion and bitterness of the heart, there was a pardon for 8 years of suffering. Philippe allowed the silence of a moment to swallow the emotions that had just developed themselves. Then, with a cheerful smile, "We will not go today," said he. "I have a plan." And, turning towards the door, he hoped to see Aramis, whose absence began to alarm him. The Queen Mother wished to leave the room. "Remain where you are, mother," said he. "I wish you to make your peace with M. Fouquet." "I bear M. Fouquet no ill will. I only dreaded his prodigalities. We will put that to rights, and will take nothing of the superintendent but his good qualities." "What is your Majesty looking for?" said Henrietta, seeing the king's eyes constantly turned toward the door, and wishing to let fly a little poisoned arrow at his heart, supposing he was so anxiously expecting either lavalier or a letter from her. "My sister," said the young man, who had divined her thought, thanks to that marvelous perspicuity of which fortune was from that time about to allow him the exercise. "My sister, I am expecting a most distinguished man, a most able counselor, whom I wish to present to you all, recommending him to your good graces." "Ah, come in then, D'Artagnan." "What does your Majesty wish?" said D'Artagnan, appearing. "Where is Monsieur the Bishop of Vannes, your friend?" "Why, sire?" "I am waiting for him, and he does not come. Let him be sought for." D'Artagnan remained for an instant stupefied, but soon, reflecting that Aramis had left Vaux privately on a mission from the king, he concluded that the king wished to preserve the secret. "Sire," replied he, "does your Majesty absolutely require M. d'Herblay to be brought to you?" "Absolutely is not the word," said Philippe. "I do not want him so particularly as that, but if he can be found." "I thought so," said D'Artagnan to himself. "Is this M. d'Herblay the Bishop of Vannes?" "Yes, madam." "A friend of M. Fouquet?" "Yes, madam, an old musketeer, and of Austria blushed, one of the 4 braves who formerly performed such prodigies." The old queen repented of having wished to bite. She broke off the conversation, in order to preserve the rest of her teeth. "Whatever may be your choice, sire," said she, "I have no doubt it will be excellent." All bowed in support of that sentiment. "You will find in him," continued Philippe, "the depth and penetration of M. de Richelieu, without the avarice of M. de Mazarin." "A prime minister, sire," said Monsieur in a fright. "I will tell you all about that, brother. But it is strange that M. d'Herblay is not here." He called out, "Let M. Fouquet be informed that I wish to speak to him." "Oh, before you, do not retire." De Saint-Aignan returned, bringing satisfactory news of the queen, who only kept her bed from precaution and to have strength to carry out the king's wishes. Whilst everybody was seeking M. Fouquet and Aramis, the new king quietly continued his experiments, and everybody, family, officers, servants, had not the least suspicion of his identity. His air, his voice, and manners were so like the king's. On his side, Philippe, applying all countenances the accurate descriptions and keynotes of character supplied by his accomplice Aramis, conducted himself so as not to give birth to a doubt in the minds of those who surrounded him. Nothing from that time could disturb the usurper. With what strange facility had Providence just reversed the loftiest fortune of the world to substitute the lowliest in its stead. Philippe admired the goodness of God with regard to himself, and seconded it with all the resources of his admirable nature. But he felt, at times, something like a specter gliding between him and the rays of his new glory. Aramis did not appear. The conversation had languished in the royal family. Philippe, preoccupied, forgot to dismiss his brother and Madame Henrietta. The latter were astonished, and began, by degrees, to lose all patience. Anne of Austria stooped toward her son's ear and addressed some words to him in Spanish. Philippe was completely ignorant of that language, and grew pale at this unexpected obstacle. But, as if the spirit of the imperturbable Aramis had covered him with his infallibility, instead of appearing disconcerted, Philippe rose. "Well, what?" said Anne of Austria. "What is all that noise?" said Philippe, turning round toward the door of the second staircase. And a voice was heard saying, This way, this way. A few steps more, sire. The voice of M. Fouquet, said D'Artagnan, who was standing close to the Queen Mother. Then M. d'Herblay cannot be far off, added Philippe. But he then saw what he little thought to have beheld so near to him. All eyes were turned towards the door at which M. Fouquet was expected to enter, but it was not M. Fouquet who entered. A terrible cry resounded from all corners of the chamber, a painful cry uttered by the king and all present. It is given to but few men, even those whose destiny contains the strangest elements and accidents the most wonderful, to contemplate such a spectacle similar to that which presented itself in the royal chamber at that moment. The half-closed shutters only admitted the entrance of an uncertain light passing through thick violet velvet curtains lined with silk. In this soft shade, the eyes were by degrees dilated, and every one present saw others rather with imagination than with actual sight. There could not, however, escape, in these circumstances, one of the surrounding details, and the new object which presented itself appeared as luminous as though it shone out in full sunlight. So it happened with Louis XIV. He showed himself pale and frowning in the doorway of the secret stairs. The face of Fouquet appeared behind him, stamped with sorrow and determination. The Queen Mother, who perceived Louis XIV, and who held a hand Philippe, uttered a cry which we have spoken, as if she beheld a phantom. Monsieur was bewildered and kept turning his head in astonishment from one to the other. Madame made a step forward, thinking she was looking at the form of her brother-in-law reflected in a mirror, and, in fact, the illusion was possible. The two princes, both pale as death, for we renounced the hope of being able to describe the fearful state of Philippe, trembling, clenching their hands convulsively, measured each other with looks, and darted their glances, sharp as poniards, at each other. Silent, panting, bending forward, they appeared as if about to spring upon an enemy. The unheard-of resemblance of countenance, gesture, shape, height, even to the resemblance of costume, produced by chance for Louis XIV, had been to the Louvre and put on a violet-colored dress. The perfect analogy of the two princes completed the consternation of Anne of Austria, and yet she did not at once guess the truth. There are misfortunes in life so truly dreadful that no one will at first accept them. People rather believe in the supernatural and the impossible. Louis had not reckoned on these obstacles. He expected that he had only to appear to be acknowledged, a living son. He could not endure the suspicion of equality with any one. He did not admit that every torch should not become darkness at the instant he shone out with his conquering ray. At the aspect of Philippe, then, he was perhaps more terrified than anyone round him, and his silence, his immobility were this time a concentration and a calm which precede the violent explosions of concentrated passion. But Fouquet, who shall paint his emotion and stupor in presence of this living portrait of his master? Fouquet thought Aramis was right, that this newly arrived was a king as pure in his race as the other, and that, for having repudiated all participation in this coup d'etat, so skillfully got up by the general of the Jesuits, he must be a mad enthusiast, unworthy of ever dipping his hands in political grand strategy work. And then it was the blood of Louis XIII, which Fouquet was sacrificing to blood of Louis XIII. It was to a selfish ambition. He was sacrificing a noble ambition. To the right of keeping, he sacrificed the right of having. The whole extent of his fault was revealed to him at simple sight of the pretender. All that passed in the mind of Fouquet was lost upon the persons present. He had 5 minutes to focus meditation on this point of conscience. 5 minutes, that is to say, 5 ages, during which the two kings and their families scarcely found energy to breathe after so terrible a shock. D'Artagnan, leaning against the wall, in front of Fouquet, with his hand to his brow, asked himself the cause of such a wonderful prodigy. He could not have said at once why he doubted, but he knew assuredly that he had reason to doubt, and that in this meeting of the two Louis XIV lay all the doubt and difficulty that during late days had rendered the conduct of Aramis so suspicious to the Musketeer. These ideas were, however, enveloped in a haze, a veil of mystery. The actors in this assembly seemed to swim in the vapors of a confused waking. Suddenly Louis XIV, more impatient and more accustomed to command, ran to one of the shutters, which he opened, tearing the curtains in his eagerness. A flood of living light entered the chamber, and made Philippe draw back to the alcove. Louis seized upon this movement with eagerness, and addressing himself to the queen, "My mother," said he, "do you not acknowledge your son, since everyone here has forgotten his king?" And of Austria started and raised her arms towards heaven, without being able to articulate a single word. "My mother," said Philippe with a calm voice, "do you not acknowledge your son?" And this time, in his turn, Louis drew back. As to Anne of Austria, struck suddenly in head and heart with fell remorse, she lost her equilibrium, no one aiding her, for all were petrified. She sank back in her fauteuil, breathing a weak, trembling sigh. Louis could not endure the spectacle and the affront. He bounded toward D'Artagnan, over whose brain a vertigo was stealing, and who staggered as he caught at the door for support. "A moi, Mousquetaire," said he. "Look us in the face, and say which is the paler, he or I." This cry roused D'Artagnan, and stirred in his heart the fibers of obedience. He shook his head, and without more hesitation, he walked straight up to Philippe, on whose shoulder he laid his hand, saying, "Monsieur, you are my prisoner." Philippe did not raise his eyes towards heaven, nor stir from the spot, where he seemed nailed to the floor, his eye intently fixed upon the king his brother. He reproached him with a sublime silence for all misfortunes past, all tortures to come. Against this language of the soul the king felt he had no power. He cast down his eyes, dragging away precipitately his brother and sister, forgetting his mother, sitting motionless within 3 paces of the son whom she left a second time to be condemned to death. Philippe approached Anne of Austria, and said to her, in a soft and nobly agitated voice, "If I were not your son, I should curse you, my mother, for having rendered me so unhappy." D'Artagnan felt a shudder pass through the marrow of his bones. He bowed respectfully to the young prince, and said as he bent, "Excuse me, Monseigneur, I am but a soldier, and my oaths are his who has just left the chamber." "Thank you, M. d'Artagnan. What has become of M. d'Herblay?" "M. d'Herblay is in safety, Monseigneur," said a voice behind them, "and no one, while I live and am free, shall cause a hair to fall from his head." "Monsieur Fouquet," said the prince, smiling sadly. "Pardon me, Monseigneur," said Fouquet, kneeling, "but he who has just gone out from hence was my guest." "Here are," murmured Philippe with a sigh, "brave friends and good hearts. They make me regret the world. On M. d'Artagnan, I follow you." At the moment the captain of the Musketeers was about to leave the room with his prisoner, Colbert appeared, and, after remitting an order from the king to D'Artagnan, retired. D'Artagnan read the paper, and then crushed it in his hand with rage. "What is it?" asked the prince. "Read, Monseigneur," replied the musketeer. Philippe read the following words, hastily traced by the hand of the king. "M. D'Artagnan will conduct the prisoner to the Isle Sainte Marguerite. He will cover his face with an iron visor, which the prisoner shall never raise except at peril of his life." "That is just," said Philippe with resignation. "I am ready." "Aramis was right," said Fouquet in a low voice to the musketeer. "This one is every whit as much a king as the other." "More so," replied D'Artagnan. "He wanted only you and me." Chapter 25, in which Porthos thinks he is pursuing a duchy. Aramis and Porthos, having profited by the time granted them by Fouquet, did honor to the French cavalry by their speed. Porthos did not clearly understand on what kind of mission he was forced to display so much velocity. But as he saw Aramis spurring on furiously, he, Porthos, spurred on in the same way. They had soon, in this manner, placed 12 leagues between them and Vaux. They were then obliged to change horses, and organize a sort of post-arrangement. It was during a relay that Porthos ventured to interrogate Aramis discreetly. "Hush," replied the latter. "Know only that our fortune depends on our speed." As if Porthos had still been the musketeer, without a sou or a mail of 1626, he pushed forward. That magic word, fortune, always means something in the human ear. It means enough for those who have nothing. It means too much for those who have enough. "I shall be made a duke," said Porthos aloud. He was speaking to himself. "That is possible," replied Aramis, smiling after his own fashion, as Porthos's horse passed him. Aramis felt, notwithstanding, as though his brain were on fire. The activity of the body had not yet succeeded in subduing that of the mind. All theirs of raging passion, mental toothache, or mortal threat, raged, gnawed, and grumbled in the thoughts of the unhappy prelate. His countenance exhibited visible traces of this rude combat. Free on the highway to abandon himself to every impression of the moment, Aramis did not fail to swear at every starter's horse, at every inequality in the road. Pale, at times inundated with boiling sweats, then again dry and icy, he flogged his horses till the blood streamed from their sides. Porthos, whose dominant fault was not sensibility, groaned at this. Thus traveled they on for 8 long hours, and then arrived at Orleans. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Aramis, on observing this, judged that nothing showed pursuit to be a possibility. It would be without example that a troop capable of taking him and Porthos should be furnished with relays sufficient to perform 40 leagues in 8 hours. Thus, admitting pursuit, which was not at all manifest, the fugitives were 5 hours in advance of their pursuers. Aramis thought that there might be no imprudence in taking a little rest, but that to continue would make the matter more certain. 20 leagues more, performed with the same rapidity, 20 more leagues devoured, and no one, not even D'Artagnan, could overtake the enemies of the king. Aramis felt obliged, therefore, to inflict upon Porthos the pain of mounting on horseback again. They rode on till 7 o'clock in the evening, and had only 1 post more between them and Blois. But here a diabolical accident alarmed Aramis greatly. There were no horses at the post. The prelate asked himself by what infernal machination his enemies had succeeded in depriving him of the means of going further. He who never recognized chance as a deity, who found a cause for every accident, preferred believing that the refusal of the postmaster at such an hour, in such a country, was the consequence of an order emanating from above, an order given with a view of stopping short the kingmaker in the midst of his flight. But at the moment he was about to fly into a passion, so as to procure either a horse or an explanation, he was struck with the recollection that the Comte de la Fère lived in the neighborhood. "I am not traveling," said he. "I do not want horses for a whole stage. Find me 2 horses to go and pay a visit to a nobleman of my acquaintance who resides near this place." "What nobleman?" asked the postmaster. "Am le Comte de la Fère." "Oh," replied the postmaster, uncovered with respect, "a very worthy nobleman. But whatever may be my desire to make myself agreeable to him, I cannot furnish you with horses, for all mine are engaged by le Duc de Beaufort." "Indeed," said Aramis, much disappointed. "Only," continued the postmaster, "if you will put up a little carriage I have, I will harness an old blind horse who has still his legs left, and peradventure will draw you to the house of le Comte de la Fère." "It is worth a louis," said Aramis. "No, monsieur, such a ride is worth no more than a crown. That is what Grimaud, the Comte's intendant, always pays me when he makes use of that carriage, and I should not wish the Comte de la Fère to have to reproach me with having imposed on one of his friends." "As you please," said Aramis, "particularly as regards disobliging the Comte de la Fère. Only I think I have a right to give you a louis for your idea." "Oh, doubtless," replied the postmaster with delight, and he himself harnessed the ancient horse to the creaking carriage. In the meantime, Porthos was curious to behold. He imagined he had discovered a clue to the secret, and he felt pleased, because a visit to Athos, in the first place, promised him much satisfaction, and in the next, gave him a hope of finding at the same time a good bed and good supper. The master, having got the carriage ready, ordered one of his men to drive the strangers to La Fère. Porthos took his seat by the side of Aramis, whispering in his ear, "I understand." "Aha!" said Aramis. "And what do you understand, my friend?" "We are going, on the part of the king, to make some great proposal to Athos." "Pooh!" said Aramis. "You need tell me nothing about it," added the worthy Porthos, endeavoring to reseat himself so as to avoid the jolting. "You need tell me nothing. I shall guess." "Well, do, my friend, guess away." They arrived at Athos's dwelling about 9 o'clock in the evening, favored by a splendid moon. This cheerful light rejoiced Porthos beyond expression, but Aramis appeared annoyed by it in an equal degree. He could not help showing something of this to Porthos, who replied, I guess how it is. The mission is a secret one." These were his last words in the carriage. The driver interrupted him by saying, "Gentlemen, we have arrived." Porthos and his companion alighted before the gate of the little chateau, where we are about to meet again our old acquaintances Athos and Bragelonne, the latter of whom had disappeared since the discovery of the infidelity of La Valliere. If there be one saying truer than another, it is this: great griefs contain within themselves a germ of consolation. This painful wound, inflicted upon Raoul, had drawn him nearer to his father again, and God knows how sweet were the consolations which flowed from the eloquent mouth and generous heart of Athos. The wound was not cicatrized, but Athos, by dint of conversing with his son, and mixing a little more of his life with that of the young man, had brought him to understand that this pang of a first infidelity is necessary to every human existence, and that no one is loved without encountering it. Raoul listened again and again, but never understood. Nothing replaces in the deeply afflicted heart the remembrance and thought of the beloved object. Raoul then replied to the reasoning of his father: "Monsieur, all that you tell me is true. I believe that no one has suffered in the affections of the heart so much as you have. But you are a man too great by reason of intelligence, and too severely tried by adverse fortune not to allow for the weakness of the soldier who suffers for the first time. I am paying a tribute that will not be paid a second time. Permit me to plunge myself so deeply in my grief that I may forget myself in it, that I may drown even my reason in it." Raoul, Raoul, listen, monsieur. Never shall I accustom myself to the idea that Louise, the chastest and most innocent of women, has been able so basely to deceive a man so honest and so true a lover as myself. Never can I persuade myself that I see that sweet and noble mask change into a hypocritical lascivious face. Louise lost. Louise infamous. Ah, Monseigneur, that idea is much more cruel to me than Raoul abandoned, Raoul unhappy. Athos then employed the heroic remedy. He defended Louise against Raoul and justified her perfidy by her love. "A woman who would have yielded to a king because he is a king," said he, "would deserve to be styled infamous. But Louise loves Louis. Young, both, they have forgotten. He is rank, sheer vows. Love absolves everything, Raoul. The two young people love each other with sincerity." And when he had dealt the severe poniard thrust, Athos, with a sigh, saw Raoul bound away beneath the rankling wound and fly to the thickest recesses of the wood, or the solitude of his chamber, whence an hour after he would return, pale, trembling, but subdued. Then, coming up to Athos with a smile, he would kiss his hand, like the dog who, having been beaten, caresses a respected master to redeem his fault. Raoul redeemed nothing but his weakness, and only confessed his grief. Thus passed away the days that followed that scene in which Athos had so violently shaken the indomitable pride of the king. Never, when conversing with his son, did he make any allusion to that scene. Never did he give him the details of that vigorous lecture which might perhaps have consoled the young man by showing him his rival humbled. Athos did not wish that the offended lover should forget the respect due to his king. And when Bragelonne, ardent, angry, and melancholy, spoke with contempt of royal words, of the equivocal faith which certain madmen draw from promises that emanate from thrones, when, passing over 2 centuries, with that rapidity of bird that traverses a narrow strait to go from one continent to the other, Raoul ventured to predict the time in which kings would be esteemed as less than other men, Athos said to him, in a serene, persuasive voice, "You are right, Raoul. All that you say will happen. Kings will lose their privileges, as stars which have survived their eons lose their splendor. But when that moment comes, Raoul, we shall be dead. And remember well what I say to you. In this world, all men, women, and kings must live for the present. We can only live for the future for God." This was the manner in which Athos and Raoul were, as usual, conversing and walking backwards and forwards in the long alley of limes and park, when the bell which served to announce to the Count either the hour of dinner or the arrival of a visitor was rung. And, without attaching any importance to it, he turned towards the house with his son, and at the end of the alley they found themselves in the presence of Aramis and Porthos. Chapter 26. The Last Adieus. Raoul uttered a cry, and affectionately embraced Porthos. Aramis and Athos embraced like old men, and this embrace itself being a question for Aramis, he immediately said, "My friend, we have not long to remain with you." "Ah," said the Count. "Only time to tell you of my good fortune," interrupted Porthos. "Ah," said Raoul. Athos looked silently at Aramis, whose somber air had already appeared to him very little in harmony with the good news Porthos hinted. "What is the good fortune that has happened to you?" "Let us hear it," said Raoul with a smile. "The king has made me a duke," said the worthy Porthos, with an air of mystery in the ear of the young man. "A duke by brevet." But the asides of Porthos were always loud enough to be heard by everybody. His murmurs were in the diapason of ordinary roaring. Athos heard him, and uttered an exclamation which made Aramis start. The latter took Athos by the arm, and, after having asked Porthos's permission to say a word to his friend in private, "My dear Athos," he began, "you see me overwhelmed with grief and trouble." "With grief and trouble, my dear friend?" cried the Count. "Oh, what?" "In 2 words, I have conspired against the king. That conspiracy has failed, and at this moment I am doubtless pursued." "You are pursued? Conspiracy? Eh! My friend, what do you tell me?" "The saddest truth. I am entirely ruined." "Well, but Porthos, this title of duke, what does all that mean?" "That is the subject of my severest pain. That is the deepest of my wounds. I have, believing in infallible success, drawn Porthos into my conspiracy. He threw himself into it, as you know he would do, with all his strength, without knowing what he was about. And now he is as much compromised as myself, as completely ruined as I am." "Good God!" And Athos turned towards Porthos, who was smiling complacently. "I must make you acquainted with the whole." "Listen to me," continued Aramis, and he related the history as we know it. Athos, during the recital, several times felt the sweat break from his forehead. "It was a great idea," said he, "but a great error, for which I am punished, Athos. Therefore, I will not tell you my entire thought. Tell it, nevertheless. It is a crime, a capital crime. I know it is. Lèse majesté. Porthos, poor Porthos. What would you advise me to do? Success, as I have told you, was certain. Fouquet is an honest man, and I a fool for having so ill judged him," said Aramis. "Oh, the wisdom of man! Oh, millstone that grinds a world, and which is one day stopped by a grain of sand which has fallen, no one knows how, between its wheels. Say by a diamond, Aramis. But the thing is done. How do you think of acting? I am taking away Porthos. The king will never believe that that worthy man has acted innocently. He never can believe that Porthos has thought he was serving the king, whilst acting as he has done. His head would pay my fault. It shall not, must not, be so. You are taking him away whither? To Belle Isle at first. That is an impregnable place of refuge. Then I have the sea and a vessel to pass over into England, where I have many relations." "You? In England?" "Yes, or else in Spain, where I have still more. But our excellent Porthos, you ruin him, for the king will confiscate all his property. All is provided for. I know how, when once in Spain, to reconcile myself with Louis XIV and restore Porthos to favor." "You have credit, seemingly, Aramis," said Athos with a discreet air. "Much, and at the service of my friends." These words were accompanied by a warm pressure of the hand. "Thank you," replied the Count. "And while we are on this head," said Aramis, "you also are a malcontent. You also, Raoul, have griefs to lay to the king. Follow our example. Pass over into Belle Isle. Then we shall see, I guarantee upon my honor, that in a month there will be war between France and Spain on the subject of the son of Louis XIII, who is an infante likewise, and whom France detains inhumanly. Now, as Louis XIV would have no inclination for a war on that subject, I will answer for an arrangement, the result of which must bring greatness to Porthos and to me, and a duchy in France to you, who are already a grandee of Spain. Will you join us?" "No. For my part, one prefer having something to reproach the king with. It is a pride natural to my race to pretend to superiority over royal races. Doing what you propose, I should become the obliged king. I should certainly be the gainer on that ground, but I should be a loser in my conscience. No. Thank you. Then give me 2 things, Athos. Your absolution. Oh, I give it you if you really wish to avenge the weak and oppress against the oppressor." "That is sufficient for me," said Aramis. with a blush which was lost in the obscurity of the night. "And now, give me your 2 best horses to gain the second post, as I have been refused any under the pretext of the Duc de Beaufort being traveling in this country. You shall have the 2 best horses, Aramis, and again I recommend poor Porthos strongly to your care." "Oh, I have no fear on that score. One word more. Do you think I am maneuvering for him as I ought?" "The evil being committed, yes, for the king would not pardon him, and you have, whatever may be said, always a supporter in M. Fouquet, who will not abandon you, he being himself compromised, notwithstanding his heroic action. You are right, and that is why, instead of gaining the sea at once, which will proclaim my fear and guilt, that is why I remain upon French ground. But Belle Isle will be for me whatever ground I wish it to be, English, Spanish, or Roman. All will depend, with me, on the standard I shall think proper to unfurl." "How so?" "It was I who fortified Belle Isle, and so long as I defend it, nobody can take Belle Isle from me. And then, as you said just now, M. Fouquet is there. Belle Isle will not be attacked without the signature of M. Fouquet." "That is true. Nevertheless, be prudent. The king is both cunning and strong." Aramis smiled. "I again recommend Porthos to you," repeated the Count, with a sort of cold persistence. "Whatever becomes of me, Count," replied Aramis in the same tone, "our brother Porthos will fare as I do, or better." Athos bowed whilst pressing the hand of Aramis, and turned to embrace Porthos with emotion. "I was born lucky, was I not?" murmured the latter, transported with happiness, as he folded his cloak round him. "Come, my dear friend," said Aramis. Raoul had gone out to give orders for the saddling of the horses. The group was already divided. Athos saw his 2 friends on the point of departure, and something like a mist passed before his eyes and weighed upon his heart. "It is strange," thought he, "whence comes the inclination I feel to embrace Porthos once more?" At that moment Porthos turned round, and he came towards his old friend with open arms. This last endearment was tender as in youth, as in times when hearts were warm, life happy. And then Porthos mounted his horse. Aramis came back once more to throw his arms round the neck of Athos. The latter watched them along the high road, elongated by the shade in their white cloaks. Like phantoms they seemed to enlarge on their departure from the earth, and it was not in the mist, but in the declivity of the ground that they disappeared. At the end of the perspective, both seemed to have given a spring with their feet, which made them vanish as if evaporated into cloudland. Then Athos, with a very heavy heart, returned toward the house, saying to Bragelonne, "Raoul, I don't know what it is that has just told me that I have seen those 2 for the last time." "It does not astonish me, monsieur, that you should have such a thought," replied the young man, "for I have at this moment the same, and think also that I shall never see Messrs. du Vallon and d'Herblay again." "Oh, you," replied the Count, "you speak like a man rendered sad by a different cause. You see everything in black. You are young, and if you chance never to see those old friends again, it will be because they no longer exist in the world in which you have yet many years to pass. But I—" Raoul shook his head sadly and leaned upon the shoulder of the Count, without either of them finding another word in their hearts, which were ready to overflow. All at once a noise of horses and voices, from the extremity of the road to Blois, attracted their attention that way. Flambeau's bearers shook their torches merrily among the trees of their route, and turned round, from time to time, to avoid distancing the horsemen who followed them. These flames, this noise, this dust of a dozen richly caparisoned horses, formed a strange contrast in the middle of the night with the melancholy and almost funereal disappearance of the 2 shadows of Aramis and Porthos. Athos went toward the house, but he had hardly reached the parterre when the entrance gate appeared in a blaze. All the flambeaux stopped and appeared to inflame the road. A cry was heard of him, "Le Duc de Beaufort," and Athos sprang toward the door of his house. But the Duke had already alighted from his horse, and was looking around him. "I am here, Monseigneur," said Athos. "Ah, good evening, dear Count," said the prince, with that frank cordiality which won him so many hearts. "Is it too late for a friend?" "Ah, my dear prince, come in," said the Count, and M. de Beaufort leaning on the arm of Athos. They entered the house, followed by Raoul, who walked respectfully and modestly among the officers of the prince, with several of whom he was acquainted. Chapter 27. Monsieur de Beaufort. The prince turned round at the moment when Raoul, in order to leave him alone with Athos, was shutting the door and preparing to go with the other officers into an adjoining apartment. "Is that the young man I have heard him, Prince, speak so highly of?" asked him de Beaufort. "It is, monseigneur. He is quite the soldier. Let him stay. Count, we cannot spare him." "Remain, Raoul, since monseigneur permits it," said Athos. "My foi, he is tall and handsome," continued the duke. "Will you give him to me, monseigneur, if I ask him of you?" "How am I to understand you, monseigneur?" said Athos. "Why, I call upon you to bid you farewell." "Farewell? Yes, in good truth. Have you no idea of what I am about to become?" "Why, I suppose, what you have always been, monseigneur, a valiant prince and an excellent gentleman. I am going to become an African prince, a Bedouin gentleman. The king is sending me to make conquests among the Arabs. What is this you tell me, monseigneur? Strange, is it not? I, the Parisian par essence, I who have reigned in the faubourgs and have been called king of the Halles, I am going to pass from the place Malbert to the minarets of Gigelli. From a frondeur, I am becoming an adventurer. Oh, monseigneur, if you did not yourself tell me that, it would not be credible, would it? Believe me, nevertheless, and we have but to bid each other farewell. This is what comes of getting into favor again." "Into favor?" "Yes, you smile. Ah, my dear Count, do you know why I have accepted this enterprise? Can you guess?" "Because your Highness loves glory above everything." "Oh, no. There is no glory in firing muskets at savages. I see no glory in that, for my part, and it is more probable that I shall there meet with something else. But I have wished, and still wish earnestly, my dear Count, that my life should have that last facet, after all the whimsical exhibitions I have seen myself make during 50 years. For, in short, you must admit that it is sufficiently strange to be born the grandson of a king, to have made war against kings, to have been reckoned among the powers of the age, to have maintained my rank, to feel Henry IV within me, to be great admiral of France, and then to go and get killed at Gigelli among all those Turks, Saracens, and Moors. Monseigneur, you harp with strange persistence on that theme," said Athos, in an agitated voice. "How can you suppose that so brilliant a destiny will be extinguished in that remote and miserable scene? And can you believe, upright and simple as you are, that if I go into Africa for this ridiculous motive, I will not endeavor to come out of it without ridicule? Shall I not give the world cause to speak of me? And to be spoken of nowadays, when there are Monsieur le Prince M. de Turin and many others my contemporaries, I, Admiral of France, grandson of Henry IV, King of Paris, have I anything left but to get myself killed? Cordu, I will be talked of, I tell you. I shall be killed whether or not. If not there, somewhere else. Why, monseigneur, this is mere exaggeration, and hitherto you have shown nothing exaggerated save in bravery. Yes, you made up your mind to escape from Vincennes. But you aided me in that, my master, and apropos, I turned this way and that, without seeing my old friend M. Vaugirard. How is he? M. Vaugirard is still your Highness's most respectful servant, said Athos, smiling. I have 100 pistoles here for him, which I bring as a legacy. My will is made, Count. Ah, monseigneur, monseigneur. And you may understand that if Grimaud's name were to appear in my will, the duke began to laugh. Then addressing Raoul, who, from the commencement of this conversation, had sunk into profound reverie, "Young man," said he, "I know there's to be found here a certain de Vouvray wine, and I believe—" Raoul left the room precipitately to order the wine. In the meantime, M. de Beaufort took the hand of Athos. "What do you mean to do with him?" asked he. "Nothing at present, monseigneur." "Ah, yes, I know, since the passion of the king for La Valliere." "Yes, monseigneur." "That is all true, then, is it? I think I know her, that little La Valliere. She is not particularly handsome, if I remember right." "No, monseigneur," said Athos. "Does she remind your Highness of any one?" "She reminds me of a very agreeable girl, whose mother lived in the Halles." Ah, said Athos, smiling. "Oh, The good old times, added M. de Beaufort. Yes, La Valliere remind me of that girl, who had a son, had she not? 3. I believe she had, replied the Duke, with careless naivete and a complacent forgetfulness, of which no words could translate the tone and the vocal expression. Now, here is poor Raoul, who is your son, I believe. Yes, he is my son, Monseigneur. And the poor lad has been cut out by the king, and he frets. Still better, Monseigneur, he abstains. You are going to let the boy rust in idleness. It is a mistake. Come, give him to me. My wish is to keep him at home, Monseigneur. I have no longer anything in the world but him, and as long as he likes to remain. Well, well, replied the Duke, I could, nevertheless, have soon put matters to rights again. I assure you, I think he has in him the stuff of which marechals of France are made. I have seen more than one produced from less likely rough material. That is very possible, Monseigneur. But it is the king who makes marechals of France, and Raoul will never accept anything of the king. Raoul interrupted this conversation by his return. He preceded Grimaud, whose still steady hands carried the plateau with one glass and a bottle of the Duke's favorite wine. On seeing his old protégé, the Duke uttered an exclamation of pleasure. Grimaud, good evening, Grimaud, said he. How goes it? The servant bowed profoundly, as much gratified as his noble interlocutor. Two old friends, said the Duke, shaking honest Grimaud's shoulder after a vigorous fashion, which was followed by another still more profound and delighted bow from Grimaud. But what is this, Count? Only one glass? I should not think of drinking with your Highness, unless your Highness permitted me, replied Athos, with noble humility. Cordu, you were right to bring only one glass. We will both drink out of it, like two brothers in arms. Begin, Count. Do me the honor, said Athos, gently putting back the glass. You are a charming friend, replied the Duc de Beaufort, who drank and passed the goblet to his companion. But that is not all, continued he. I am still thirsty, and I wish to do honor to this handsome young man who stands here. I carry good luck with me, Vicomte, said he to Raoul. Wish for something while drinking out of my glass, and may the Black Plague grab me if what you wish does not come to pass. He held the goblet to Raoul, who hastily moistened his lips, and replied with the same promptitude. I have wished for something, Monseigneur. His eyes sparkled with a gloomy fire, and the blood mounted to his cheeks. He terrified Athos, if only with a smile. And what have you wished for? Replied the Duke, sinking back into his fauteuil, whilst with one hand he returned the bottle to Grimaud, and with the other gave him a purse. Will you promise me, Monseigneur, to grant me what I wish for? Pardieu, that is agreed upon. I wished, Monsieur le Duc, to go with you to Gigelli. Athos became pale, and was unable to conceal his agitation. The Duke looked at his friend, as if desirous to assist him to parry this unexpected blow. That is difficult. My dear Vicomte, very difficult, added he, in a lower tone of voice. Pardon me, Monseigneur, I have been indiscreet, replied Raoul in a firm voice, but as you yourself invited me to wish... To wish to leave me, said Athos. Oh, monsieur, can you imagine? Well, mordieu, cried the Duke. The young Vicomte is right. What can he do here? He will go moldy with grief. Raoul blushed, and the excitable prince continued. War is a distraction. We gain everything by it. We can only lose one thing by it, life. Then so much the worse. That is to say, memory, said Raoul eagerly. And that is to say, so much the better. He repented of having spoken so warmly when he saw Athos rise and open the window, which was, doubtless, to conceal his emotion. Raoul sprang toward the Comte, but the latter had already overcome his emotion, and turned to the lights with a serene and impassible countenance. Well, come, said the Duke, let us see. Shall he go or shall he not? If he goes, Comte, he shall be my aide-de-camp, my son. Monseigneur, cried Raoul, bending his knee. Monseigneur, cried Athos, taking the hand of the Duke. Raoul shall do just as he likes. Oh, no, monsieur, just as you like, interrupted the young man. Par la corbleu, said the prince in his turn. It is neither the Comte nor the Vicomte that shall have his way. It is I. I will take him away. The marine offers a superb fortune, my friend. Raoul smiled again so sadly that this time Athos felt his heart penetrated by it, and replied to him by a severe look. Raoul comprehended it all. He recovered his calmness, and was so guarded that not another word escaped him. The Duke at length rose, on observing the advanced hour, and said with animation, "I am in great haste, but if I am told I have lost time in talking with a friend, I will reply I have gained, on the balance, a most excellent recruit." "Pardon me, Monsieur le Duc," interrupted Raoul. "Do not tell the king so, for it is not the king I wish to serve." My friend, whom, then, will you serve? The times are past when you might have said, "I belong to M. de Beaufort." No, nowadays we all belong to the king, great or small. Therefore, if you serve on board my vessels, there can be nothing equivocal about it, my dear Vicomte. It will be the king you will serve. Athos waited with a kind of impatient joy for the reply about to be made to this embarrassing question by Raoul, the intractable enemy of the king, his rival. The father hoped that the obstacle would overcome the desire. He was thankful to M. de Beaufort, whose lightness or generous reflection had thrown an impediment in the way of the departure of a son, now his only joy. But Raoul, still firm and tranquil, replied, "Monsieur le Duc, the objection you make I have already considered in my mind. I will serve on board your vessels, because you do me the honor to take me with you, but I shall there serve a more powerful master than the king. I shall serve God." "God? How so?" said the Duke and Athos together. "My intention is to make profession and become a Knight of Malta," added Bragelonne, letting fall one by one words more icy than the drops which fall from the bare trees after the tempest of winter. For, under this blow, Athos staggered, and the prince himself was moved. Grimaud uttered a heavy groan, and let fall the bottle, which was broken without anybody paying attention. M. de Beaufort looked the young man in the face, and read plainly, though his eyes were cast down, the fire of resolution before which everything must give way. As to Athos, he was too well acquainted with that tender, but inflexible soul. He could not hope to make it deviate from the fatal road it had just chosen. He could only press the hand the Duke held out to him. "Comte, I shall set off in 2 days for Toulon," said M. de Beaufort. "Will you meet me at Paris, in order that I may know your determination? I will have the honor of thanking you there, mon prince, for all your kindness," replied the Comte. "And be sure to bring the Vicomte with you, whether he follows me or does not follow me," added the Duke. "He has my word, and I only ask yours." Having thrown a little balm upon the wound of paternal heart, he pulled the ear of Grimaud, whose eyes sparkled more than usual, and regained his escort in the parterre. The horses, rested and refreshed, set off with spirit through the lovely night, and soon placed a considerable distance between their master and the chateau. Athos and Bragelonne were again face to face. 11 o'clock was striking. The father and son preserved a profound silence towards each other, where an intelligent observer would have expected cries and tears. But these two men were of such a nature that all emotion following their final resolutions plunged itself so deep into their hearts that it was lost forever. They passed, then, silently and almost breathlessly, the hour that preceded midnight. The clock, by striking, alone pointed out to them how many minutes had lasted the painful journey made by their souls and the immensity of their remembrances of the past and fear of the future. Athos rose first, saying, "It is late, then, till tomorrow." Raoul rose, and in his turn embraced his father. The latter held him clasped to his breast and said in a tremulous voice, "In 2 days you have left me, my son. Left me forever, Raoul." "Monsieur," replied the young man, "I had formed a determination, that of piercing my heart with my sword, but you would have thought that cowardly. I have renounced that determination, and therefore we must part. You leave me desolate by going, Raoul. Listen to me again, monsieur, I implore you. If I do not go, I shall die here of grief and love. I know how long a time I have to live thus. Send me away quickly, monsieur, or you will see me basely die before your eyes, in your house. This is stronger than my will, stronger than my strength. You may plainly see that within 1 month I lived 30 years, and that I approach the end of my life." "Then," said Athos coldly, "you go with the intention of getting killed in Africa?" "Oh, tell me." Do not lie. Raoul grew deadly pale and remained silent for 2 seconds, which were to his father 2 hours of agony. Then, all at once, "Monsieur," said he, "I have promised to devote myself to God. In exchange for the sacrifice I make of my youth and liberty, I will only ask of him one thing, and that is to preserve me for you, because you are the only tie which attaches me to this world. God alone can give me the strength not to forget that I owe you everything, and that nothing ought to stand in my esteem before you." Athos embraced his son tenderly and said, "You have just replied to me on the word of honor of an honest man. In 2 days we shall be with M. de Beaufort at Paris, and you will then do what will be proper for you to do. You are free, Raoul. Adieu." And he slowly gained his bedroom. Raoul went down into the garden and passed the night in the Alley of Limes. Chapter 28. Preparation for departure. Athos lost no more time in combating this immutable resolution. He gave all his attention to preparing, during the 2 days the Duke had granted him, the proper appointments for Raoul. This labor chiefly concerned Grimaud, who immediately applied himself to it with the goodwill and intelligence we know he possessed. Athos gave this worthy servant orders to take the route to Paris when the equipment should be ready, and not to expose himself to the danger of keeping the Duke waiting or delaying Raoul, so that the Duke should perceive his absence. He himself, the day after the visit of M. de Beaufort, set off for Paris with his son. For the poor young man, it was an emotion easily to be understood, thus to return to Paris amongst all the people who had known and loved him. Every face recalled a pang to him who had suffered so much, to him who had loved so much, some circumstances unhappy love. Raoul, on approaching Paris, felt as if he were dying. Once in Paris, he really existed no longer. When he reached Guy's residence, he was informed that Guiche was with Monsieur. Raoul took the road to the Luxembourg, and when arrived, without suspecting that he was going to a place where La Valliere had lived, he heard so much music and respired so many perfumes. He heard so much joyous laughter and saw so many dancing shadows that if it had not been for a charitable woman who perceived him so dejected and pale beneath a doorway, he would have remained there a few minutes and then would have gone away, never to return. But, as we have said, in the first antechamber he had stopped, solely for the sake of not mixing himself with all those happy beings he felt were moving around him in the adjacent salons. And as one of Monsieur's servants, recognizing him, had asked him if he wished to see Monsieur or Madame, Raoul had scarcely answered him, but had sunk down upon a bench near the velvet doorway, looking at a clock, which had stopped for nearly an hour. The servant had passed on, and another, better acquainted with him, had come up and interrogated Raoul whether he should inform M. de Guiche of his being there. This name did not even arouse the recollections of Raoul. The persistent servant went on to relate that de Guiche had just invented a new game of lottery and was teaching to the ladies. Raoul, opening his large eyes, like the absent man in Theophrastus, made no answer, but his sadness increased 2 shades. With his head hanging down, his limbs relaxed, his mouth half open for the escape of his sighs, Raoul remained, thus forgotten, in the antechamber, when all at once a ladies rode past, rubbing against the doors of a side salon, which opened on the gallery. A lady, young, pretty, and gay, scolding an officer of the household, entered by that way, and expressed herself with much vivacity. The officer replied in calm but firm sentences. It was rather a little love pet than a quarrel of courtiers, and was terminated by a kiss on the fingers of the lady. Suddenly, on perceiving Raoul, the lady became silent, and pushing away the officer, "Make your escape, Malicorne," said she. "I did not think there was anyone here. I shall curse you if they have either heard or seen us." Malicorne hastened away. The young lady advanced behind Raoul, and stretching her joyous face over him as he lay. "Monsieur is a gallant man," said she, "and no doubt—" "Mademoiselle de Montalais," said Raoul, paler than death. He rose unsteadily and tried to make his way across the slippery mosaic of the floor, but she had comprehended that savage and cruel grief. She felt that in the flight of Raoul there was an accusation of herself. A woman, ever vigilant, she did not think she ought to let the opportunity slip of making good her justification. But Raoul, though stopped by her in the middle of the gallery, did not seem disposed to surrender without a combat. He took it up in a tone so cold and embarrassed that if they had been thus surprised, the whole court would have no doubt about the proceedings of Mademoiselle de Montalais. "Ah, monsieur," said she with disdain, "what you are doing is very unworthy of a gentleman. My heart inclines me to speak to you. You compromise me by a reception almost uncivil. You are wrong, monsieur, and you confound your friends with enemies. Farewell." Raoul had sworn never to speak of Louise, never even to look at those who might have seen Louise. He was going into another world, that he might never meet with anything Louise had seen or even touched. But after the first shock of his pride, after having had a glimpse of Montalais, the companion of Louise, Montalais, who reminded him of the turret of Blois and the joys of youth, all his reason faded away. "Pardon me, mademoiselle, it enters not, it cannot enter into my thoughts to be uncivil. Do you wish to speak to me?" said she, with the smile of former days. "Well, come somewhere else, for we may be surprised." "Oh," said he. She looked at the clock, doubtingly, then, having reflected, "In my apartment," said she, "we shall have an hour to ourselves." And taking her course, lighter than a fairy, she ran up to her chamber, followed by Raoul, shutting the door, and placing in the hands of her camorist the mantle she had held upon her arm. "You were seeking M. de Guiche, were you not?" said she to Raoul. "Yes, mademoiselle. I will go and ask him to come up here, presently, after I have spoken to you." "Do so, mademoiselle." "Are you angry with me?" Raoul looked at her for a moment, then, casting down his eyes, "Yes," said he. "You think I was concerned in the plot which brought about the rupture, do you not?" "Rupture," said he, with bitterness. "Oh, mademoiselle, there can be no rupture where there has been no love." "You are in error," replied Montalais. "Louise did love you." Raoul started. "Not with love, I know. But she liked you, and you ought to have married her before you set out for London." Raoul broke into a sinister laugh, which made Montalais shudder. "You tell me that very much at your ease, mademoiselle. Do people marry whom they like? You forget that the king then kept for himself as his mistress her of whom we are speaking." "Listen," said the young woman, pressing the hands of Raoul in her own. "You were wrong in every way. A man of your age ought never to leave a woman of hers alone." "There is no longer any faith in the world then," said Raoul. "No, vicomte," said Montalais quietly. "Nevertheless, let me tell you that if, instead of loving Louise coldly and philosophically, you had endeavored to awaken her to love—" "Enough, I pray you, mademoiselle," said Raoul. "I feel as though you are all of both sexes of a different age from me. You can laugh, and you can banter agreeably. Mademoiselle, I love Mademoiselle de—" Raoul could not pronounce her name. "I loved her well. I put my faith in her. Now I am quits by loving her no longer." "Oh, vicomte," said Montalais, pointing to his reflection in a looking-glass. "I know what you mean, mademoiselle. I am much altered, am I not? Well, do you know why? Because my face is a mirror of my heart. The outer surface changed to match the mind within." "You are consoled, then?" said Montalais, sharply. "No, I shall never be consoled. I don't understand you, M. de Bragelonne. I care but little for that. I do not quite understand myself. You have not even tried to speak to Louise?" "Who? I?" exclaimed the young man, with eyes flashing fire. "I? Why do you not advise me to marry her? Perhaps the king would consent now." And he rose from his chair full of anger. "I see," said Montalais, "that you are not cured, and that Louise is one enemy the more." "One enemy the more. Yes. Favorites are but little beloved at the court of France." "Oh, while she has her lover to protect her, is not that enough? She has chosen him of such a quality that her enemies cannot prevail against her. But, stopping all at once, and then she has you for friend, mademoiselle," added he, with a shade of irony which did not glide off the cuirass. "Who? I? Oh, no. I am no longer one of those whom Mademoiselle de la Valliere condescends to look upon, but this but so big with menace and with storm, this but which made the heart of Raoul beat. Such griefs did it presage for her whom lately he loved so dearly, this terrible but so significant in a woman like Monalise, was interrupted by a moderately loud noise heard by the speakers proceeding from the alcove behind the wainscoting. Montalise turned to listen, and Raoul was already rising when a lady entered the room, quietly by the secret door, which she closed after her. "Madam," exclaimed Raoul, on recognizing the sister-in-law of the king. "Stupid wretch," murmured Montalise, throwing herself, but too late, before the princess. "I have been mistaken in an hour." She had, however, time to warn the princess, who was walking towards Raoul. "De Bragelonne, madam." And at these words the princess drew back, uttering a cry in her turn. "Your Royal Highness," said Montalise with volubility, "is kind enough to think of this lottery, and—" The princess began to lose countenance. Raoul hastened his departure, without divining all, but he felt that he was in the way. Madame was preparing a word transition to recover herself, when a closet opened in front of the alcove, and M. de Guiche issued, all radiant, also from that closet. The palest of the four, we must admit, was still Raoul. The princess, however, was near fainting, and was obliged to lean upon the foot of the bed for support. No one ventured to support her. This scene occupied several minutes of terrible suspense. But Raoul broke it. He went up to the count, whose inexpressible emotion made his knees tremble, and taking his hand, "Dear count," said he, "tell madam I am too unhappy not to merit pardon. Tell her also that I have loved in the course of my life, and that the horror of the treachery that has been practiced on me renders me inexorable towards all other treachery that may be committed around me. This is why, mademoiselle," said he, smiling to Montalise, "I never would divulge the secret of the visits of my friend to your apartment. Obtain from madam, who is so clement and so generous, obtain her pardon for you whom she has just surprised also. You are both free, love each other, be happy." The princess felt for a moment a despair that cannot be described. It was repugnant to her, notwithstanding the exquisite delicacy which Raoul had exhibited, to feel herself at the mercy of one who had discovered such an indiscretion. It was equally repugnant to her to accept the evasion offered by this delicate deception. Agitated, nervous, she struggled against the double stings of these two troubles. Raoul comprehended her position, and came once more to her aid. Bending his knee before her, "Madam," said he in a low voice, "in 2 days I shall be far from Paris. In a fortnight I shall be far from France, where I shall never be seen again." "Are you going away then?" said she, with great delight. "With M. de Beaufort." "Into Africa?" cried de Guiche in his turn. "You, Raoul?" "Oh, my friend, into Africa, where everybody dies." And forgetting everything, forgetting that forgetfulness itself compromised the princess more eloquently than his presence. "Ingrate," said he, "and you have not even consulted me." And he embraced him, during which time Montalise had led away madam and disappeared herself. Raoul passed his hand over his brow and said with a smile, "I've been dreaming." Then warmly to Guiche, who by degrees absorbed him, "My friend," said he, "I conceal nothing from you, who are the elected of my heart. I am going to seek death in yonder country. Your secret will not remain in my breast more than a year." "Oh, Raoul, a man! Do you know what is my thought, Count? This is it. I shall live more vividly, being buried beneath the earth, than I have lived for this month past. We are Christians, my friend, and if such sufferings were to continue, I would not be answerable for the safety of my soul." De Guiche was anxious to raise objections. "Not one word more on my account," said Raoul. "But advice to you, dear friend, what I am going to say to you is of much greater importance." "What is that?" "Without doubt you risk much more than I do, because you love." "Oh, it is a joy so sweet to me to be able to speak to you thus." "Well then, de Guiche, beware of Monalise." "What?" "Of that kind friend. She was a friend of her you know of. She ruined her by pride. You are mistaken. And now, when she has ruined her, she would ravish from her the only thing that renders that woman excusable in my eyes." "What is that?" "Her love." "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that there is a plot formed against her who is the mistress of the king, a plot formed in the very house of madam." "Can you think so?" "I am certain of it." "By Montalise? Take her as the least dangerous of the enemies I dread for the other, Explain yourself clearly, my friend, and if I can understand you, in 2 words, Madame has been long jealous of the king. I know she has. Oh, fear nothing. You are beloved. You are beloved, Count. Do you feel the value of these 3 words? They signify that you can raise your head, that you can sleep tranquilly, that you can thank God every minute of your life. You are beloved. That signifies that you may hear everything, even the counsel of a friend who wishes to preserve your happiness. You are beloved de Guiche. You are beloved. You do not endure those atrocious nights, those nights without end, which, with arid eye and fainting heart, others pass through who are destined to die. You will live long, if you act like the miser who, bit by bit, crumb by crumb, collects and heaps up diamonds and gold. You are beloved. Allow me to tell you what you must do that you may be beloved forever. De Guiche contemplated for some time this unfortunate young man, half mad with despair, till there passed through his heart something like remorse at his own happiness. Raoul suppressed his feverish excitement, to assume the voice and countenance of an impassible man. They will make her, whose name I should wish still to be able to pronounce. They will make her suffer. Swear to me that you will not second them in anything, but that you will defend her when possible, as I would have done myself. I swear I will, replied Duche. And, continued Raoul, some day, when you shall have rendered her a great service, some day when she shall thank you, promise me to say these words to her. I have done you this kindness, madam, at the warm request of M. de Bragelonne, whom you so deeply injured. I swear I will, murmured de Guiche. That is all. Adieu. I set out tomorrow, or the day after, for Toulon. If you have a few hours to spare, give them to me. All, all, cried the young man. Thank you. And what are you going to do now? I am going to meet M. Lucon at Planchet's residence, where we hope to find in D'Artagnan. M. D'Artagnan? Yes, I wish to embrace him before my departure. He is a brave man who loves me dearly. Farewell, my friend. You are expected, no doubt. You will find me when you wish at the lodgings of the Count. Farewell. The 2 young men embraced. Those who chanced to see them both thus would not have hesitated to say, pointing to Raoul, that is the happy man. Chapter 29. Planchet's Inventory. Athos, during the visit made to the Luxembourg by Raoul, had gone to Planchet's residence to inquire after D'Artagnan. The Count, on arriving at the Rue de Lombards, found the shop of the grocer in great confusion, but it was not the incumbent of a lucky sale, or that of an arrival of goods. Planchet was not enthroned, as usual, on sacks and barrels. No, a young man with a pen behind his ear and another with an account book in his hand were setting down a number of figures, whilst a third counted and weighed. An inventory was being taken. Athos, who had no knowledge of commercial matters, felt himself a little embarrassed by material obstacles and the majesty of those who were thus employed. He saw several customers sent away, and asked himself whether he, who came to buy nothing, would not be more properly deemed importunate. He therefore asked very politely if he could see M. Planchet. The reply, quite carelessly given, was that M. Planchet was packing his trunks. These words surprised Athos. What? His trunks, said he. Is M. Planchet going away? Yes, monsieur, directly. Then, if you please, inform him that M. Lucon de la Fere desires to speak to him for a moment. At the mention of the Count's name, one of the young men, no doubt accustomed to hear it pronounced with respect, immediately went to inform Planchet. It was at this moment that Raoul, after his painful scene with Montalais and de Guiche, arrived at the grocer's house. Planchet left his job directly he received the Count's message. Ah, Monsieur le Count, exclaimed he, how glad I am to see you. What good star brings you here? My dear Planchet, said Athos, pressing the hand of his son, whose sad look he silently observed, we are come to learn of you, but in what confusion do I find you? You are as white as a miller. Where have you been rummaging? Ah, diable! Take care, monsieur. Don't come near me till I have well shaken myself. What for? Flour or dust only whiten? No, no. What you see on my arms is arsenic. Arsenic. Yes, I am taking my precautions against rats. I I suppose in an establishment like this, rats play a conspicuous part. It is not with this establishment I concern myself, Monsieur le Comte. The rats have robbed me of more here than they will ever rob me of again. What do you mean? Why, you may have observed, monsieur, my inventory is being taken. Are you leaving trade, then? Mon Dieu, yes. I have disposed of my business to one of my young men. Bah! You are rich, then, I suppose? Monsieur, I have taken a dislike to the city. I don't know whether it is because I am growing old. And as M. D'Artagnan one day said, when we grow old, we more often think of the adventures of our youth. But for some time past, I have felt myself attracted towards the country and gardening. I was a countryman formerly. And Planchet marked this confession with a rather pretentious laugh. For a man making profession of humility, Athos made a gesture of approval and then added, "You are going to buy an estate, then?" "I have bought one, monsieur." "Ah, that is still better. A little house at Fontainebleau, with something like 20 acres of land round it." "Very well, Planchet. Accept my compliments on your acquisition. But, monsieur, we are not comfortable here. The cursed dust makes you cough. Corbleu, I do not wish to poison the most worthy gentleman in the kingdom." Athos did not smile at this little pleasantry which Planchet had aimed at him, in order to try his strength in mundane facetiousness. "Yes," said Athos, "let us have a little talk by ourselves. In your own room, for example. You have a room, have you not?" "Certainly, Monsieur le Comte. Upstairs, perhaps?" And Athos, seeing Planchet a little embarrassed, wished to relieve him by going first. "It is but," said Planchet, hesitating. Athos was mistaken in the cause of his hesitation, and, attributing it to a fear the grocer might have of offering humble hospitality. Never mind," said he, still going up. "The dwelling of a tradesman in this quarter is not expected to be a palace. Come on." Raoul nimbly preceded him and entered first. 2 cries were heard simultaneously, we may say 3. One of these cries dominated the others. It emanated from a woman. Another proceeded from the mouth of Raoul. It was an exclamation of surprise. He had no sooner uttered it than he shut the door sharply. The third was from fright. It came from Planchet. "I ask your pardon," added he. "Madame is dressing." Raoul had, no doubt, seen that what Planchet said was true, for he turned round to go downstairs again. "Madame," said Athos. "Oh, pardon me, Planchet, I did not know that you had upstairs." "It is Truchen," added Planchet, blushing a little. "It is whoever you please, my good Planchet, but pardon my rudeness." No. Go up now, gentlemen." "We will do no such thing," said Athos. "Oh, madam, having notice, has had time." "No, Planchet, farewell." Gentlemen, you would not disoblige me by thus standing on the staircase, or by going away without having sat down." "If we had known you had a lady upstairs," replied Athos, with his customary coolness, "we would have asked permission to pay our respects to her." Planchet was so disconcerted by this little extravagance that he forced a passage, and himself opened the door to admit the Comte and his son. Truchen was quite dressed, in the costume of the shopkeeper's wife, rich yet coquettish, German eyes attacking French eyes. She left the apartment after 2 courtesies, and went down into the shop, but not without having listened at the door, to know what Planchet's gentlemen visitors would say of her. Athos suspected that, and therefore turned the conversation accordingly. Planchet, on his part, was burning to give explanations, which Athos avoided. But, as certain tenacities are stronger than others, Athos was forced to hear Planchet recite his idyls of felicity, translated into a language more chaste than that of Longus. So Planchet related how Truchen had charmed the years of his advancing age, and brought good luck to his business, as Ruth did to Boaz. "You want nothing now, then, but heirs to your property." "If I had one, he would have 300,000 livres," said Planchet. "Humph! You must have one, then," said Athos, phlegmatically, "if only to prevent your little fortune being lost." This word little fortune placed Planchet in his rank, like the voice of the sergeant when Planchet was but a piqueur in a regiment of Piedmont, in which Rochefort had placed him. Athos perceived that the grocer would marry Truchen, and, in spite of fate, establish a family. This appeared the more evident to him when he learned that the young man to whom Planchet was selling the business was her cousin. Having heard all that was necessary of the happy prospect of the retiring grocer, "What is M. d'Artagnan about?" said he. "He is not at the Louvre." "Ah, Monsieur le Comte, Monsieur d'Artagnan has disappeared." "Disappeared?" said Athos in surprise. "Oh, Monsieur, we know what that means. But I do not know. Whenever M. d'Artagnan disappears, it is always for some mission or some great affair. Has he said anything to you about it?" "Never. You were acquainted with his departure for England formerly, were you not?" "On account of the speculation," said Planchet heedlessly. "The speculation? I mean," interrupted Planchet, quite confused. Well, neither your affairs nor those of your master are in question. The interest we take in him alone has induced me to apply to you, since the captain of the Musketeers is not here, and as we cannot learn from you where we are likely to find M. d'Artagnan, we will take our leave of you. Au revoir, Planchet. Au revoir. Let us be gone, Raoul." "Monsieur le Comte, I wish I were able to tell you." "Oh, not at all. I am not the man to reproach a servant with discretion." This word servant struck rudely on the ears of the demi-millionaire Planchet, but natural respect and bonhomie prevailed over pride. "There is nothing indiscreet in telling you, Monsieur le Comte. M. d'Artagnan came here the other day." "Aha!" "And remained several hours consulting a geographical chart." "You are right. Then, my friend, say no more about it." "And the chart is there as a proof," added Planchet, who went to fetch from a neighboring wall, where it was suspended by a twist, forming a triangle with the bar of the window, to which it was fastened, the plan consulted by the captain on his last visit to Planchet. This plan, which he brought to the Comte, was a map of France, upon which the practiced eye of that gentleman discovered an itinerary, marked out with small pins. Wherever a pin was missing, a hole denoted its having been there. Athos, by following with his eye the pins and holes, saw that D'Artagnan had taken the direction of south, and gone as far as the Mediterranean, towards Toulon. It was near that the marks and the punctured places ceased. The Comte de la Fère puzzled his brains for some time, to divine what the Musketeer could be going to do at Cannes, and what motive could have led him to examine the banks of the Various. The reflections of Athos suggested nothing. His accustomed perspicacity was at fault. Raoul's researches were not more successful than his father's. "Never mind," said the young man to the Comte, who silently, and with his finger, had made him understand the route of D'Artagnan. "We must confess that there is a providence always occupied in connecting our destiny with that of M. d'Artagnan. There he is on the coast of Cannes, and you, monsieur, will at least conduct me as far as Toulon. Be assured that we shall meet with him more easily upon our route than on this map." Then, taking leave of Planchet, who was scolding his shopmen, even the cousin of Truchen, his successor, the gentlemen set out to pay a visit to M. de Beaufort. On leaving the grocer's shop, they saw a coach, the future depository of the charms of Mademoiselle Truchen and Planchet's bags of crowns. "Everyone journeys towards happiness by the route he chooses," said Raoul in a melancholy tone. "Road to Fontainebleau," cried Planchet to his coachman. Chapter 30. The inventory of M. de Beaufort, to have talked to D'Artagnan with Planchet, to have seen Planchet quit Paris to bury himself in his country retreat, had been for Athos and his son like a last farewell to the noise of the capital, to their life of former days. What, in fact, did these men leave behind them, one of whom had exhausted the past age in glory, and the other the present age in misfortune? Evidently neither of them had anything to ask of his contemporaries. They had only to pay a visit to M. de Beaufort, and arrange with him the particulars of departure. The Duke was lodged magnificently in Paris. He had one of those superb establishments pertaining to great fortunes, the like of which certain old men remember to have seen in all their glory in the times of wasteful liberality of Henry III's reign. Then, really, several great nobles were richer than the king. They knew it, used it, and never deprived themselves of the pleasure of humiliating his royal majesty when they had an opportunity. It was this egotistical aristocracy Richelieu had constrained to contribute, with its blood, its purse, and its duties, to what was from his time styled the king's service. From Louis XI, That terrible mower down of the great, to Richelieu. How many families had raised their heads? How many, from Richelieu to Louis XIV, had bowed their heads, never to raise them again? But M. de Beaufort was born a prince, and of a blood which is not shed upon scaffolds, unless by the decree of peoples, a prince who had kept up a grand style of living. How did he maintain his horses, his people, and his table? Nobody knew, himself less than others. Only there were then privileges for the sons of kings, to whom nobody refused to become a creditor, whether from respect or the persuasion that they would some day be paid. Athos and Raoul found the mansion of the Duke in as much confusion as that of Planchet. The Duke, likewise, was making his inventory. That is to say, he was distributing to his friends everything of value he had in his house. Owing nearly 2 millions, an enormous amount in those days, and de Beaufort had calculated that he could not set out for Africa without a good round sum, and in order to find that sum, he was distributing to his old creditors plate, arms, jewels, and furniture, which was more magnificent in selling it and brought him back double. In fact, how could a man to whom 10,000 livres were owing refuse to carry away a present worth 6,000, enhanced in estimation from having belonged to a descendant of Henry IV? And how, after having carried away that present, could he refuse 10,000 livres more to this generous noble? This, then, was what had happened. The Duke had no longer a dwelling house. They had become useless to an admiral whose place of residence is his ship. He had no longer need of superfluous arms. When he was placed amidst his cannons, no more jewels, which the sea might rob him of, but he had 300,000 or 400,000 crowns fresh in his coffers. And throughout the house there was a joyous movement of people who believed they were plundering Monseigneur. The prince had, in a supreme degree, the art of making happy the creditors most to be pitied. Every distressed man, every empty purse, found an impatience and sympathy for his position. To some he said, "I wish I had what you have. I would give it you." And to others, "I have but this silver ewer. It is worth at least 500 livres. Take it." The effect of which was, so truly is courtesy a current payment, that the prince constantly found means to renew his creditors. This time he used no ceremony. It might be called a general pillage. He gave up everything. The Oriental fable of the poor Arab who carried away from the pillage of palace a kettle at the bottom of which was concealed a bag of gold, and whom everybody allowed to pass without jealousy. This fable had become a truth in the prince's mansion. Many contractors paid themselves upon the offices of the Duke. Thus, the provision department, who plundered the clothes presses and the harness rooms, attached very little value to things which tailors and saddlers set great store by. Anxious to carry home to their wives presents given them by Monseigneur, many were seen bounding joyously along, under the weight of earthen jars and bottles, gloriously stamped with the arms of the prince. M. de Beaufort finished by giving away his horses and the hay from his lofts. He made more than 30 happy with kitchen utensils, and 30 more with the contents of his cellar. Still further, all these people went away with the conviction that M. de Beaufort only acted in this manner to prepare for a new fortune concealed beneath the Arabs' tents. They repeated to each other, while pillaging his hotel, that he was sent into Jelly by the king to reconstruct his lost fortunes, that the treasures of Africa would be equally divided between the admiral and the king of France, that these treasures consisted in mines of diamonds or other fabulous stones. The gold and silver mines of Mount Atlas did not even obtain the honor of being named. In addition to the mines to be worked, which could not be begun till after campaign, there would be the booty made by the army. M. de Beaufort would lay his hands on all the riches pirates had robbed Christendom since the Battle of Lepanto. The number of millions from these sources defied calculation. Why, then, should he, who was going in quest of such treasure, set any store by the poor utensils of his past life? And, reciprocally, why should they spare the property of him who spared it so little himself? Such was the position of affairs. Athos, with his piercing practiced glance, saw what was going on at once. He found the Admiral of France a little exalted, for he was rising from a table of 50 covers, at which the guests had drunk long and deeply to prosperity of the expedition, at the conclusion of which repast the remains with the dessert had been given to the servants, and the empty dishes and plates to the curious. The prince was intoxicated with his ruin and his popularity at one and the same time. He had drunk his old wine to the health of his wine of the future. when he saw Athos and Raoul. "There is my aide-de-camp being brought to me," he cried. "Come hither, Comte! Come hither, Vicomte!" Athos tried to find a passage through the heaps of linen and plate. "Ah, step over, said the Duke, offering a full glass to Athos. The latter drank it. Raoul scarcely moistened his lips. "Here is your commission," said the prince to Raoul. "I had prepared it, reckoning upon you. You will go before me as far as Antibes." "Yes, monseigneur." "Here is the order." And de Beaufort gave Raoul the order. "Do you know anything of the sea?" "Yes, monseigneur. I have traveled with Louis Prince." "That is well. All these barges and lighters must be in attendance to form an escort and carry my provisions. The army must be prepared to embark in a fortnight at the very latest." "That shall be done, monseigneur. The present order gives you the right to visit and search all the isles along the coast. You will there make the enrollments and levies you may want from me." "Yes, monsieur le Duc." "And you are an active man, and will work freely. You will spend much money." "I hope not, monseigneur, but I am sure you will. My intendant has prepared the orders of 1,000 livres, drawn upon the cities of south. He will give you 100 of them. Now, dear Vicomte, be gone." Athos interrupted the prince. "Keep your money, monseigneur. War is to be waged among the Arabs with gold as well as lead." "I wish to try the contrary," replied the Duke. "And then you are acquainted with my ideas upon the expedition. Plenty of noise, plenty of fire, and if so it must be, I shall disappear in the smoke." Having spoken thus, de Beaufort began to laugh, but his mirth was not reciprocated by Athos and Raoul. He perceived this at once. "Ah," said he, with the courteous egotism of his rank and age, "you are such people as a man should not see after dinner. You are cold, stiff, and dry when I am all fire, suppleness, and wine. No, devil take me. I should always see you fasting, Vicomte, and you, Comte, if you wear such a face as that, you shall see me no more." He said this, pressing the hand of Athos, who replied with a smile, "Monseigneur, do not talk so grandly, because you happen to have plenty of money. I predict that within a month you will be dry, stiff, and cold, in presence of your strong box, and that then, having Raoul at your elbow, fasting, you will be surprised to see him gay, animated, and generous, because he will have some new crowns to offer you." "God grant it may be so," cried the delighted Duke. "Comte, stay with me." "No, I shall go with Raoul. The mission with which you charge him is a troublesome and difficult one. Alone it would be too much for him to execute. You do not observe, monseigneur. You have given him command of the first order. Bah! And in your naval arrangements, too. That may be true, but one finds that such fine young fellows as your son generally do all that is required of them. Monseigneur, I believe you will find nowhere so much zeal and intelligence, so much real bravery as in Raoul. But if you fail to arrange your embarkation, you would only meet the fate that you deserve." "Humph! You are scolding me, then." "Monseigneur, to provision a fleet, to assemble a flotilla, to enroll your maritime force, would take an admirable year. Raoul is a cavalry officer, and you allow him a fortnight. I tell you he will do it. He may, but I will go and help him." "To be sure you will. I reckon upon you, and still further believe that when we are once at Toulon, you will not let him depart alone." "Oh," said Athos, shaking his head. "Patience, patience. Monseigneur, permit us to take our leave. Begone, then, and may my good luck attend you." "Adieu, Monseigneur, and may your own good luck attend you likewise." "Here is an expedition admirably commenced," said Athos to his son. "No provisions, no store flotilla. What can be done thus?" "Humph!" murmured Raoul. "If all are going to do as I am, provisions will not be wanted." "Monsieur," replied Athos sternly, "do not be unjust and senseless in your egotism or your grief, whichever you please to call it. If you set out for this war solely with the intention of getting killed therein, you stand in need of nobody, and it was scarcely worthwhile to recommend you to M. de Beaufort. But when you have been introduced to the prime commandant, when you have accepted the responsibility of a post in his army, the question is no longer about you, but about all those poor soldiers who, as well as you, have hearts and bodies, who will weep for their country and endure all the necessities of their condition. Remember, Raoul, that officers are ministers as useful to the world as priests, and that they ought to have more charity. Monsieur, I know it and have practiced it. I would have continued to do so still, but you forget also that you are of a country that is proud of its military glory. Go and die if you like, but do not die without honor and without advantage to France. Cheer up, Raoul. Do not let my words grieve you. I love you and wish to see you perfect. I love your reproaches, monsieur, said the young man mildly. They alone may cure me, because they prove to me that someone loves me still. And now, Raoul, let's be off. The weather is so fine, the heavens so clear, those heavens which we always find above our heads, which you'll see more clear still at Gigelli, and which will speak to you and me there, as they speak to me here of God. The two gentlemen, after having agreed on this point, talked over the wild freaks of the Duke, convinced that France would be served in a very incomplete manner, as regarded both spirit and practice, in the ensuing expedition, and having summed up the ducal policy under the one word vanity, they set forward in obedience rather to their will than destiny. The sacrifice was half accomplished. Chapter 31. The Silver Dish. The journey passed off pretty well. Athos and his son traversed France at the rate of 15 leagues per day. Sometimes more, sometimes less, according to the intensity of Raoul's grief. It took them a fortnight to reach Toulon, and they lost all traces of D'Artagnan at Antibes. They were forced to believe that the captain of the Musketeers was desirous of preserving an incognito on his route, for Athos derived from his inquiries an assurance that such a cavalier as he described had exchanged his horse for a well-closed carriage on quitting Avignon. Raoul was much affected at not meeting with D'Artagnan. His affectionate heart longed to take a farewell, and received consolation from that heart of steel. Athos knew from experience that D'Artagnan became impenetrable when engaged in any serious affair, whether on his own account or on the service of king. He even feared to offend his friend or thwart him by too pressing inquiries. And yet, when Raoul commenced his labor of classing the flotilla and got together the chalons and lighters to send them to Toulon, one of the fishermen told the Count that his boat had been laid up to refit since a trip he had made on account of a gentleman who was in great haste to embark. Athos, believing that this man was telling a falsehood in order to be left at liberty to fish, and so gain more money when all his companions were gone, insisted upon having the details. The fisherman informed him that 6 days previously, a man had come in the night to hire his boat for the purpose of visiting the island of St. Honorat. The price was agreed upon, but the gentleman had arrived with an immense carriage case, which he insisted upon embarking, in spite of the many difficulties that oppose operation. The fisherman wished to retract. He had even threatened, but his threats had procured him nothing but a shower of blows from the gentleman's cane, which fell upon his shoulders sharp and long. Swearing and grumbling, he had recourse to the syndic of his brotherhood at Antibes, who administered justice among themselves and protect each other, but the gentleman had exhibited a certain paper, at sight of which the syndic, bowing to the very ground, enjoined obedience from the fisherman and abused him for having been refractory. They then departed with the freight. "But all this does not tell us," said Athos, "how you injured your boat." "This is the way. I was steering toward St. Honorat as the gentleman desired me, but he changed his mind and pretended that I could not pass to the south of the abbey." "And why not?" "Because, monsieur, there is in front of the square tower of the Benedictines, toward the southern point, the bank of the Moine." "A rock?" asked Athos. "Level with the water, but below water. A dangerous passage, yet one I have cleared 1,000 times. The gentleman required me to land him at St. Marguerite's." "Well, monsieur," cried the fisherman, with his Provençal accent, "a man is a sailor, or he is not. He knows his course, or he is nothing but a freshwater lubber. I was obstinate, and wished to try the channel. The gentleman took me by the collar, and told me quietly he would strangle me. My mate armed himself with a hatchet, and so did I. We had the affront of the night before to pay him out for, but the gentleman drew his sword, and used it in such an astonishingly rapid manner, that we neither of us could get near him. I was about to hurl my hatchet at his head, and I had a right to do so, hadn't I, monsieur? For a sailor aboard is master, as a citizen is in his chamber. I was going, then, in self-defense, to cut the gentleman in two, when, all at once, Believe me or not, monsieur, the great carriage case opened of itself, I don't know how, and there came out of it sort of phantom, his head covered with a black helmet and a black mask, something terrible to look upon, which came toward me threatening with its fist. And that was, said Athos, that was the devil, monsieur. For the gentleman, with great glee, cried out on seeing him, "Ah, thank you, monseigneur. A most strange story," murmured the Count, looking at Raoul. "And what did you do?" asked the latter the fisherman. "You must know, monsieur, that two poor men, such as we are, could be no match for two gentlemen. But when one of them turned out to be the devil, we had no earthly chance. My companion and I did not stop to consult one another. We made but one jump into the sea, for we were within 700 or 800 feet of the shore. Well, and then, monseigneur, as there was a little wind from the southwest, the boat drifted into the sands of St. Marguerite's." "Oh, but the travelers?" "Bah, you need not be uneasy about them. It was pretty plain that one was a devil and protected the other, for when we recovered the boat, after she got afloat again, instead of finding these two creatures injured by the shock, we found nothing, not even the carriage or case." Very strange, repeated the Count. "But after that, what did you do, my friend?" "I made my complaint to the governor of St. Marguerite's, who brought my finger under my nose by telling me if I plagued him with such silly stories, he would have me flogged." "What? Did the governor himself say so?" "Yes, monsieur, and yet my boat was injured, seriously injured, for the prow is left upon the point of St. Marguerite's, and the carpenter asks 120 livres to repair it." "Very well," replied Raoul. "You will be exempted from the service. Go. We will go to St. Marguerite's, shall we?" said the Comte de Bragelonne, as the man walked away. "Yes, monsieur, for there is something to be cleared up. That man does not seem to me to have told the truth." "Nor to me either, Raoul. The story of the masked man and the carriage having disappeared may be told to conceal some violence these fellows have committed upon their passengers in the open sea, to punish him for his persistence in embarking. I formed the same suspicion. The carriage was more likely to contain property than a man. We shall see to that, Raoul. The gentleman very much resembles D'Artagnan. I recognize his methods of proceeding. Alas, we are no longer the young invincibles of former days. Who knows whether the hatchet or the iron bar of this miserable coaster has not succeeded in doing that which the best blades of Europe, balls, and bullets have not been able to do in 40 years. That same day they set out for St. Marguerite's, on board a chasse-maree come from Toulon under orders. The impression they experienced on landing was a singularly pleasing one. The island seemed loaded with flowers and fruits. In its cultivated part it served as a garden for the governor. Orange, pomegranate, and fig trees bent beneath the weight of their golden or purple fruits. All round this garden, in the uncultivated parts, red partridges ran about in conveys among the brambles and tufted junipers, and at every step of the Comte and Raoul a terrified rabbit quitted his time and heaped to scuttle away to the burrow. In fact, this fortunate isle was uninhabited, flat, offering nothing but a tiny bay for convenience of embarkation, and under protection of the governor, who went shares with them. Smugglers made use of it as a provisional entrepot, at the expense of not killing the game or devastating the garden. With this compromise, the governor was in a situation to be satisfied with a garrison of 8 men to guard his fortress, in which 12 cannons accumulated coats of moldy green. The governor was a sort of happy farmer, harvesting wines, figs, oil, and oranges, preserving his citrons and cedrates in the sun of his casemates. The fortress, encircled by a deep ditch, its only guardian, arose like 3 heads upon turrets connected with each other by terraces covered with moss. Athos and Raoul wandered for some time round the fences of the garden, without finding anyone to introduce them to the governor. They ended by making their own way into garden. It was at the hottest time of the day. Each living thing sought its shelter under grass or stone. The heavens spread their fiery veils as if to stifle all noises, to envelop all existences. The rabbit under the broom, the fly under the leaf, slept as the wave did beneath the heavens. Athos saw nothing living but a soldier, upon the terrace beneath the 2nd and 3rd court, who was carrying a basket of provisions on his head. This man returned almost immediately without his basket, and disappeared in the shade of his sentry box. Athos supposed he must have been carrying dinner to someone, and, after having done so, returned to dine himself. All at once they heard someone call out, and raising their heads, perceived in the frame of the bars of the window something of a white color, like a hand that was waved backwards and forwards, something shining, like a polished weapon struck by the rays of the sun. And before they were able to ascertain what it was, a luminous train, accompanied by a hissing sound in the air, called their attention from the dungeon to the ground. A second dull noise was heard from the ditch, and Raoul ran to pick up a silver plate, which was rolling along the dry sand. The hand that had thrown this plate made a sign to the two gentlemen, and then disappeared. Athos and Raoul, approaching each other, commenced an attentive examination of the dusty plate, and they discovered, in characters traced upon the bottom of it with the point of a knife, this inscription: "I am the brother of the King of France, a prisoner today, a madman tomorrow. French gentlemen and Christians, pray to God for the soul and the reason of the son of your old rulers." The plate fell from the hands of Athos, whilst Raoul was endeavoring to make out the meaning of these dismal words. At the same moment, they heard a cry from the top of the dungeon. Quick as lightning, Raoul bent down his head, and forced down that of his father likewise. A musket barrel glittered from the crest of the wall. A white smoke floated like a plume from the mouth of the musket, and a ball was flattened against a stone within 6 inches of the two gentlemen. "Cordieu," cried Athos. "What? Our people assassinated here? Come down, cowards as you are." "Yes, come down," cried Raoul, furiously shaking his fist at the castle. One of the assailants, he who was about to fire, replied to these cries by an exclamation of surprise, and as a companion who wished to continue the attack had re-seized his loaded musket, he who had cried out threw up the weapon, and the ball flew into the air. Athos and Raoul, seeing them disappear from the platform, expected they would come down to them, and waited with a firm demeanor. 5 minutes had not elapsed, when a stroke upon a drum called the 8 soldiers of the garrison to arms, and they showed themselves on the other side of the ditch with their muskets in hand. At the head of these men was an officer, whom Athos and Raoul recognized as the one who had fired the first musket. The man ordered the soldiers to make ready. "We are going to be shot," cried Raoul, "but, sword in hand, at least let us leap the ditch. We shall kill at least 2 of these scoundrels when their muskets are empty." And, suiting the action to word, Raoul was springing forward, followed by Athos, when a well-known voice resounded behind them. "Athos." "Raoul." "D'Artagnan," replied the two gentlemen. "Recover arms." "Mordioux," cried the captain to the soldiers. "I was sure I could not be mistaken." "What is the meaning of this?" asked Athos. "What? Were we to be shot without warning? It was I who was going to shoot you, and if the governor missed you, I should not have missed you. My dear friends, how fortunate it is that I am accustomed to take a long aim instead of firing at the instant I raise my weapon. I thought I recognized you. Ah, my dear friends, how fortunate." And D'Artagnan wiped his brow, for he had run fast, and emotion with him was not feigned. "How?" said Athos. "And is the gentleman who fired at us the governor of the fortress?" "In person." "And why did he fire at us? What have we done to him?" "Pardieu, you received what the prisoner threw to you." "That is true. That plate, the prisoner has written something on it, has he not?" "Yes." "Good heavens! I was afraid he had." And D'Artagnan, with all the marks of mortal disquietude, seized the plate to read the inscription. When he had read it, a fearful pallor spread across his countenance. "Oh, good heavens!" repeated he. "Silence! Here is the governor. And what will he do to us? Is it our fault?" "It is true, then," said Athos, in a subdued voice. "It is true." "Silence! I tell you, silence. If he only believes you can read, if he only suspects you have understood, I love you, my dear friends. I would willingly be killed for you, but, said Athos and Raoul, "but I could not save you from perpetual imprisonment if I saved you from death." "Silence, then." Silence again. The governor came up, having crossed the ditch upon a plank bridge. "Well," said he to D'Artagnan, "what stops us? You are Spaniards. You do not understand a word of French. said the captain eagerly to his friends in a low voice. Well, replied he, addressing the governor, I was right. These gentlemen are two Spanish captains with whom I was acquainted at Ypres last year. They don't know a word of French. Ah, said the governor sharply, and yet they were trying to read the inscription on the plate. D'Artagnan took it out of his hands, effacing the characters with the point of his sword. How? Cried the governor. What are you doing? I cannot read them now. It is a state secret, replied D'Artagnan bluntly, and as you know that, according to the king's orders, it is under the penalty of death anyone should penetrate, I will, if you like, allow you to read it and have you shot immediately afterwards. During this apostrophe, half serious, half ironical, Athos and Raoul preserved the coolest, most unconcerned silence. But is it possible, said the governor, that these gentlemen do not comprehend at least some words? Suppose they do. If they do understand a few spoken words, it does not follow that they should understand what is written. They cannot even read Spanish. A noble Spaniard, remember, ought never to know how to read. The governor was obliged to be satisfied with these explanations, but he was still tenacious. Invite these gentlemen to come to the fortress, said he. That I will willingly do. I was about to propose it to you. The fact is, the captain had quite another idea, and would have wished his friend 100 leagues off, but he was obliged to make the best of it. He addressed the two gentlemen in Spanish, giving them a polite invitation, which they accepted. They all turned towards the entrance of the fort, and, the incident being at an end, the 8 soldiers returned to their delightful leisure, for a moment disturbed by this unexpected adventure. Chapter 32. Captive and Jailers. When they had entered the fort, and whilst the governor was making some preparations for the reception of his guests, "Come," said Athos, "let us have a word of explanation whilst we are alone." "It is simply this," replied the Musketeer. "I have conducted hither a prisoner, who the king commands shall not be seen. You came here. He has thrown something to you through the lattice of his window. I was at dinner with the governor. I saw the object thrown, and I saw Raoul pick it up. It does not take long to understand this. I understood it, and I thought you in intelligence with my prisoner, and then you commanded us to be shot. Ma foi, I admit it, but if I was the first to seize a musket, fortunately, I was the last to take aim at you. If you had killed me, D'Artagnan, I should have had the good fortune to die for the royal house of France, and it would be an honor to die by your hand, its noblest and most loyal defender." "What the devil, Athos, do you mean by the royal house?" stammered D'Artagnan. "You don't mean that you, a well-informed and sensible man, can place any faith in the nonsense written by an idiot? I do believe in it. With so much the more reason, my dear Chevalier, from your having orders to kill all those who do believe in it," said Raoul. "That is because," replied the captain of the Musketeers, "because every calumny, however absurd it may be, has the almost certain chance of becoming popular." "No, D'Artagnan," replied Athos promptly, "but because the king is not willing that the secret of his family should transpire among the people, and cover with shame the executioners of the son of Louis XIII. Do not talk in such a childish manner, Athos, or I shall begin to think you have lost your senses. Besides, explain to me how it is possible Louis XIII should have a son in the Isle of St. Marguerite, a son whom you have brought hither masked in a fishing boat," said Athos. "Why not?" D'Artagnan was brought to a pause. "Oh," said he, "whence do you know that a fishing boat brought you to St. Marguerite's with the carriage containing the prisoner, with a prisoner whom you styled Monseigneur?" "Oh, I am acquainted with all that," resumed the Comte. D'Artagnan bit his mustache. "If it were true," said he, "that I had brought hither in a boat and with a carriage a masked prisoner, nothing proves that this prisoner must be a prince of the house of France." "Ask Aramis such riddles," replied Athos coolly. "Aramis," cried the Musketeer, quite at a stand. "Have you seen Aramis?" "After his discomfiture at Vaux, yes. I have seen Aramis, a fugitive, pursued, bewildered, ruined. And Aramis has told me enough to make me believe in the complaints this unfortunate young prince cut upon the bottom of the plate." D'Artagnan's head sunk on his breast in some confusion. "This is the way," said he. in which God turns to nothing that which men call wisdom. A fine secret must that be of which 12 or 15 persons hold the tattered fragments. Athos, cursed be the chance which has brought you face to face with me in this affair. For now, well, said Athos, with his customary mild severity, is your secret lost because I know it? Consult your memory, my friend. Have I not borne secrets heavier than this? You have never borne one so dangerous, replied D'Artagnan, in a tone of sadness. I have something like a sinister idea that all who are concerned with this secret will die, and die unhappily. The will of God be done, said Athos, but here is your governor. D'Artagnan and his friends immediately resumed their parts. The governor, suspicious and hard, behaved towards D'Artagnan with a politeness almost amounting to obsequiousness. With respect to the travelers, he contented himself with offering good cheer and never taking his eye from them. Athos and Raoul observed that he often tried to embarrass them by sudden attacks or to catch them off their guard, but neither the one nor the other gave him the least advantage. What D'Artagnan had said was probable, and the governor did not believe it to be quite true. They rose from the table to repose a while. What is this man's name? I don't like the looks of him, said Athos to D'Artagnan in Spanish. De Saint Mars, replied the captain. He is, then, I suppose, the prince's jailer? How can I tell? I may be kept at Saint Marguerite forever. Oh, no, not you. My friend, I am in the situation of a man who finds a treasure in the midst of a desert. He would like to carry it away, but he cannot. He would like to leave it, but he dares not. The king will not dare to recall me, for no one else would serve him as faithfully as I do. He regrets not having me near him, from being aware that no one would be of so much service near his person as myself. But it will happen as it may please God. But, observed Raoul, your not being certain proves that your situation here is provisional, and you will return to Paris? Ask these gentlemen, interrupted the governor, what was their purpose in coming to Saint Marguerite? They came from learning there was a convent of Benedictines at Saint Honorat, which is considered curious, and from being told there was excellent shooting in the island. That is quite at their service, as well as yours, replied Saint Mars. D'Artagnan politely thanked him. When will they depart? Added the governor. Tomorrow, replied D'Artagnan. De Saint Mars went to make his rounds, and left D'Artagnan alone with the pretended Spaniards. Oh, exclaimed the Musketeer, here's a life and society that suits me very little. I command this man, and he bores me, Mordioux. Come, let us have a shot or two at the rabbits. The walk will be beautiful and not fatiguing. The whole island is but a league and a half in length, with the breadth of a league, a real park. Let us try to amuse ourselves. As you please, D'Artagnan. Not for the sake of amusing ourselves, but to gain an opportunity for talking freely. D'Artagnan made a sign to a soldier, who brought the gentleman some guns, and then returned to the fort. And now, said the Musketeer, answer me the question put to you by that black-looking Saint Mars. What did you come to do at the Laren Isles? To bid you farewell. Bid me farewell. What do you mean by that? Is Raoul going anywhere? Yes. Then I will lay a wager it is with M. de Beaufort. With M. de Beaufort it is, my dear friend. You always guess correctly. From habit. Whilst the two friends were commencing their conversation, Raoul, with his head hanging down and his heart oppressed, seated himself on a mossy rock, his gun across his knees, looking at the sea, looking at the heavens, and listening to the voice of his soul. He allowed the sportsman to attain a considerable distance from him. D'Artagnan remarked his absence. He has not recovered the blow, said he to Athos. He is struck to death. Oh, your fears exaggerate. I hope. Raoul is of a tempered nature. Around all hearts as noble as his, there is a second envelope that forms a cuirass. The first bleeds, the second resists. No, replied Athos. Raoul will die of it. Mordioux, said D'Artagnan, in a melancholy tone, and he did not add a word to this exclamation. Then, a minute after, why do you let him go? Because he insists on going. And why do you not go with him? Because I could not bear to see him die. D'Artagnan looked his friend earnestly in the face. You know one thing, continued the Count, leaning upon the arm of the captain. "You know that in the course of my life I have been afraid of but few things. Well, I have an incessant gnawing, insurmountable fear that an hour will come in which I shall hold the dead body of that boy in my arms." "Oh!" murmured D'Artagnan. "Oh! He will die, I know. I have a perfect conviction of that. But I would not see him die." "How is this, Athos? You come and place yourself in the presence of the bravest man you say you have ever seen, of your own D'Artagnan, of that man without an equal, as you formerly called him, and you come and tell him, with your arms folded, that you are afraid of witnessing the death of your son, you who have seen all that can be seen in this world. Why have you this fear, Athos? Man upon this earth must expect everything, and ought to face everything. Listen to me, my friend. After having worn myself out upon this earth of which you speak, I have preserved but two religions, that of life, friendship, my duty as a father, that of eternity, love, and respect for God. Now, I have within me the revelation that if God should decree it, my friend or my son should render up his last sigh in my presence. Oh, no, I cannot even tell you, D'Artagnan. Speak, speak, tell me. I am strong against everything, except against the death of those I love. For that only there is no remedy. He who dies gains. He who sees others die loses. No, this is it. To know that I should no more meet on earth him whom I now behold with joy. To know that there would nowhere be a D'Artagnan any more. Nowhere again be a Raoul. Oh, I am old. Look you, I have no longer courage. I pray God to spare me my weakness. But if he struck me so plainly and in that fashion, I should curse him. A Christian gentleman ought not to curse his God, D'Artagnan. It is enough to once have cursed a king. Humph! Sighed D'Artagnan, a little confused by this violent tempest of grief. Let me speak to him, Athos. Who knows? Try, if you please, but I am convinced you will not succeed. I will not attempt to console him. I will serve him. You will? Doubtless, I will. Do you think this would be the first time a woman had repented of an infidelity? I will go to him, I tell you. Athos shook his head and continued his walk alone. D'Artagnan, cutting across the brambles, rejoined Raoul and held out his hand to him. Well, Raoul, you have something to say to me? I have a kindness to ask of you, replied Bragelonne. Ask it then. You will some day return to France? I hope so. Ought I to write to Mademoiselle de la Valliere? No, you must not. But I have many things to say to her. Go and say them to her, then. Never. Pray, what virtue do you attribute to a letter, which your speech might not possess? Perhaps you are right. She loves the king, said D'Artagnan bluntly, and she is an honest girl. Raoul started. And you whom she abandons, she, perhaps, loves better than she does the king, but after another fashion. D'Artagnan, do you believe she loves the king? To idolatry, her heart is inaccessible to any other feeling. You might continue to live near her and would be her best friend. Ah! Exclaimed Raoul, with a passionate burst of repugnance at such a hideous hope. Will you do so? It would be base. That is a very absurd word, which would lead me to think slightly of your understanding. Please understand, Raoul, that it is never base to do that which is imposed upon us by a superior force. If your heart says to you, go there or die, why go, Raoul? Was she base or brave, she whom you loved, in preferring the king to you, the king whom her heart commanded her imperiously to prefer to you? No, she was the bravest of women. Do, then, as she has done. Oblige yourself. Do you know one thing of which I am sure, Raoul? What is that? Why, that by seeing her closely with the eyes of a jealous man, well, you would cease to love her. Then I am decided, my dear D'Artagnan, to set off to see her again? No, to set off that I may never see her again. I wish to love her forever. Ha! I must confess, replied the Musketeer, that is a conclusion which I was far from expecting. This is what I wish, my friend. You will see her again, and you will give her a letter which, if you think proper, will explain to her, as to yourself, what is passing in my heart. Read it. I drew it up last night. Something told me I should see you today. He held the letter out, and D'Artagnan read. Mademoiselle, you are not wrong in my eyes in not loving me. You have only been guilty of one fault toward me, that of having left me to believe you loved me. This error will cost me my life. I pardon you, but I cannot pardon myself. It is said that happy lovers are deaf to the sorrows of rejected lovers. It will not be so with you, who did not love me, save with anxiety. I am sure that if I had persisted in endeavoring to change that friendship into love, you would have yielded out of fear of bringing about my death, or lessening the esteem I had for you. It is much more delightful to me to die, knowing that you are free and satisfied. How much, then, will you love me, when you will no longer fear either my presence or reproaches? You will love me, because, however charming a new love may appear to you, God has not made me in anything inferior to him you have chosen, and because my devotedness, my sacrifice, and my painful end will assure me, in your eyes, a certain superiority over him, I have allowed to escape, in the candid credulity of my heart, the treasure I possessed. Many people tell me that you love me enough to lead me to hope you would have loved me much. That idea takes from my mind all bitterness, and leads me only to blame myself. You will accept this last farewell, and you will bless me for having taken refuge in an inviolable asylum where hatred is extinguished and where all love endures forever. Adieu, mademoiselle. If your happiness could be purchased by the last drop of my blood, I would shed that drop. I willingly make the sacrifice of it to my misery. Raoul, vicat me de Bragelonne. The letter reads very well, said the captain. I have only one fault to find with it. Tell me what that is, said Raoul. Why, it is that it tells everything, except the thing which exhales, like a mortal poison from your eyes and from your heart, except the senseless love which still consumes you. Raoul grew paler, but remained silent. Why did you not write simply these words? Mademoiselle, instead of cursing you, I love you and I die. That is true, exclaimed Raoul, with a sinister kind of joy, and tearing the letter he had just taken back. He wrote the following words upon a leaf of his tablets. To procure the happiness of once more telling you I love you, I commit the baseness of writing to you, and to punish myself for that baseness, I die. And he signed it. You will give her these tablets, Captain, will you not? When? Asked the latter. On the day, said Bragelonne, pointing to the last sentence, on the day when you can place a date under these words. And he sprang away quickly to join Athos, who was returning with slow steps. As they re-entered the fort, the sea rose with that rapid, gusty vehemence which characterizes the Mediterranean. The ill humor of the element became a tempest. Something shapeless and tossed about violently by the waves appeared just off the coast. What is that? Said Athos. A wrecked boat. No, it is not a boat, said D'Artagnan. Pardon me, said Raoul. There is a bark gaining the port rapidly. Yes, there is a bark in the creek, which is prudently seeking shelter here, but that which Athos points to in the sand is not a boat at all. It has run aground. Yes, I see it. It is the carriage, which I threw into the sea after landing the prisoner. Well, said Athos, if you take my advice, D'Artagnan, you will burn that carriage, in order that no vestige of it may remain, without which the fishermen of Antibes, who will believe they had to do with the devil, will endeavor to prove that your prisoner was but a man. Your advice is good, Athos, and I will this night have it carried out, or rather, I will carry out myself. But let us go in, for the rain falls heavily, and the lightning is terrific. As they were passing over the ramparts to a gallery of which D'Artagnan had the key, they saw the St. Mars directing his steps toward the chamber inhabited by the prisoner, upon a sign from D'Artagnan. They concealed themselves in an angle of the staircase. What is it? Said Athos. You will see. Look, the prisoner is returning from chapel. And they saw, by the red flashes of lightning against the violet fog which the wind stamped upon the bank-ward sky, they saw pass gravely, at 6 paces behind the governor, a man clothed in black and masked by a visor of polished steel, soldered to a helmet of the same nature, which altogether enveloped the whole of his head. The fire of the heavens cast red reflections on the polished surface, and these reflections, flying off capriciously, seemed to be angry looks launched by the unfortunate, instead of imprecations. In the middle of the gallery, the prisoner stopped for a moment to contemplate the infinite horizon, to respire the sulphurous perfumes of the tempest, to drink in thirstily the hot rain, and to breathe a sigh resembling a smothered groan. "Come on, monsieur," said St. Mars sharply to the prisoner, for he already became uneasy at seeing him look so long beyond the walls. "Monsieur, come on." "Say, Monseigneur," cried Athos from his corner, with a voice so solemn and terrible that the governor trembled from head to foot. Athos insisted upon respect being paid to fallen majesty. The prisoner turned round. "Who spoke?" asked St. Mars. "It was I," replied D'Artagnan, showing himself promptly. "You know that is the order." "Call me neither monsieur nor monseigneur," said the prisoner in his turn, in a voice that penetrated to the very soul of Raoul. "Call me accursed." He passed on, and the iron door croaked after him. "There goes a truly unfortunate man," murmured the musketeer in a hollow whisper, pointing out to Raoul the chamber inhabited by the prince. Chapter 33. Promises. Scarcely had D'Artagnan re-entered his apartment with his two friends, when one of the soldiers of the fort came to inform him that the governor was seeking him. The bark which Raoul had perceived at sea, and which appeared so eager to gain the port, came to Sainte Marguerite with an important dispatch for the captain of the musketeers. On opening it, D'Artagnan recognized the writing of the king. "I should think," said Louis XIV, "you have completed the execution of my orders, Monsieur d'Artagnan. Return, then, immediately to Paris, and join me at the Louvre." "There is the end of my exile," cried the musketeer with joy. "God be praised, I am no longer a jailer." And he showed the letter to Athos. "So, then you must leave us?" replied the latter, in a melancholy tone. "Yes, but to meet again, dear friend," seeing that Raoul was old enough now to go alone with M. de Beaufort, and would prefer his father going back in company with M. d'Artagnan, to forcing him to travel 200 leagues solitarily to reach home at La Fère. "Will you not, Raoul?" "Certainly," stammered the latter, with an expression of tender regret. "No, no, my friend," interrupted Athos. "I will never quit Raoul till the day his vessel disappears on the horizon. As long as he remains in France, he shall not be separated from me. As you please, dear friend, but we will at least leave Sainte Marguerite together. Take advantage of the bark that will convey me back to Antibes." "With all my heart. We cannot too soon be at a distance from this fort, and from the spectacle that shocked us so just now." The three friends quitted the little isle, after paying their respects to the governor, and by the last flashes of the departing tempest, they took their farewell of the white walls of the fort. D'Artagnan parted from his friend that same night, after having seen fire set to the carriage upon the shore by the orders of St. Mars, according to the advice the captain had given him, before getting on horseback, and after leaving the arms of Athos. "My friends," said he, "you bear too much resemblance to two soldiers who are abandoning their post. Something warns me that Raoul will require being supported by you in his rank. Will you allow me to ask permission to go over into Africa with 100 good muskets? The king will not refuse me, and I will take you with me." "Monsieur d'Artagnan," replied Raoul, pressing his hand with emotion, "thanks for that offer, which would give us more than we wish. Either Monsieur le Comte or I, who am young, stand in need of labor of mind and fatigue of body. Monsieur le Comte wants a profoundest repose. You are his best friend. I recommend him to your care. In watching over him, you are holding both our souls in your hands." "I must go. My horse is all in a fret," said D'Artagnan, with whom the most manifest sign of a lively emotion was a change of ideas in conversation. "Come, Comte, how many days longer has Raoul to stay here?" 3 days at most." "And how long will it take you to reach home?" "Oh, a considerable time," replied Athos. "I shall not like the idea of being separated too quickly from Raoul. Time will travel too fast of itself to require me to aid it by distance. I shall only make half stages." "And why so, my friend?" "Nothing is more dull than traveling slowly, and hostelry life does not become a man like you. My friend, I came hither on post horses, but I wish to purchase 2 animals of a superior kind. Now, to take them home fresh, it would not be prudent to make them travel more than 7 or 8 leagues a day. Where's Grimaud?" "He arrived yesterday morning with Raoul's appointments, and I have left him to sleep. That is, never to come back again." D'Artagnan suffered to escape him. "Till we meet again, then, dear Athos, and if you are diligent, I shall embrace you the sooner." So, saying, he put his foot in the stirrup, which Raoul held. "Farewell," said the young man, embracing him. "Farewell," said D'Artagnan, as he got into his saddle. His horse made a movement which divided the cavalier from his friends. This scene had taken place in front of the house chosen by Athos, near the gates of Antibes, whither D'Artagnan, after his supper, had ordered his horses to be brought. The road began to branch off there, white and undulating in the vapors of the night. The horse eagerly respired the salt, sharp perfume of the marshes. D'Artagnan put him to a trot, and Athos and Raoul sadly turned toward the house. All at once they heard the rapid approach of a horse's steps, and first believed it to be one of those singular repercussions which deceive the ear at every turn in a road. But it was really the return of the horsemen. They uttered a cry of joyous surprise, and the captain, springing to ground like a young man, seized with his arms the two beloved heads of Athos and Raoul. He held them long, embraced us, without speaking a word, or suffering the sigh which was bursting his breast to escape him. Then, as rapidly as he had come back, he set off again, with a sharp application of his spurs to the sides of his fiery horse. "Alas!" said the Count in a low voice. "Alas! Alas!" "An evil omen on his side," said D'Artagnan to himself, making up for lost time. "I could not smile upon them. An evil omen." The next day Grimaud was on foot again. The service commanded by M. de Beaufort was happily accomplished. The flotilla, sent to Toulon by the exertions of Raoul, had set out, dragging after it in little nutshells. Almost invisible, the wives and friends of the fishermen and smugglers put in requisition for the service of the fleet. The time, so short, which remained for father and son to live together, appeared to go by with double rapidity, like some swift stream that flows towards eternity. Athos and Raoul returned to Toulon, which began to be filled with the noise of carriages, with the noise of arms, the noise of neighing horses. The trumpeters sounded their spirited marches. The drummers signalized their strength. The streets were overflowing with soldiers, servants, and tradespeople. The Duc de Beaufort was everywhere, superintending the embarkation with the zeal and interest of a good captain. He encouraged the humblest of his companions. He scolded his lieutenants, even those of the highest rank. Artillery, provisions, baggage. He insisted upon seeing all himself. He examined the equipment of every soldier, assured himself of the health and soundness of every horse. It was plain that, like boastful, egotistical in his hotel, the gentleman became the soldier again, the high noble, a captain, in face of the responsibility he had accepted. And yet, it must be admitted that, whatever was the care with which he presided over the preparations for departure, it was easy to perceive careless precipitation, and the absence of all the precaution that make the French soldier the first soldier in the world, because, in that world, he is the one most abandoned to his own physical and moral resources. All things having satisfied, or appearing to have satisfied, the admiral, he paid his compliments to Raoul, and gave the last order for sailing, which was ordered the next morning at daybreak. He invited the Count had his son to dine with him, but they, under a pretext of service, kept themselves apart. Gaining their hostelry, situated under the trees of the great place, they took their repast in haste, and Athos led Raoul to the rocks which dominate the city, vast gray mountains, whence a view is infinite and embraces a liquid horizon which appears, so remote is it, on a level with the rocks themselves. The night was fine, as it always is in these happy climes. The moon, rising behind the rocks, unrolled a silver sheet on the cerulean carpet of the sea. In the roadsteads maneuvered silently the vessels which had just taken their rank to facilitate the embarkation. The sea, loaded with phosphoric light, opened beneath the hulls of the barks that transported the baggage and munitions. Every dip of prow plowed up this gulf of white flames. From every or dropped liquid diamonds. The sailors, rejoicing in the largesses of the admiral, were heard murmuring their slow and artless songs. Sometimes the grinding of the chains was mixed with the dull noise of shot falling into the holds. Such harmonies, such a spectacle, oppressed the heart like fear and dilated like hope. All this life speaks of death. Athos had seated himself with his son upon the moss among the brambles of the promontory. Around their heads passed and repassed large bats, carried along by the fearful whirl of their blind chase. The feet of Raoul were over the edge of the cliff, bathed in that void which is peopled by vertigo and provokes to self-annihilation. When the moon had risen to its fullest height, caressing with light the neighboring peaks, when the watery mirror was illumined in its full extent, and the little red fires had made their openings in the black masses of every ship, Athos, collecting all his ideas and all his courage, said, God has made all these things that we see, Raoul. He has made us also, poor atoms mixed up with this monstrous universe. We shine like those fires and those stars. We sigh like those waves. We suffer like those great ships, which are worn out in plowing waves and obeying the wind that urges them toward an end, as the breath of God blows us towards a port. Everything likes to live, Raoul, and everything seems beautiful to living things. Monsieur, said Raoul, we have before us a beautiful spectacle. How good D'Artagnan is, interrupted Athos suddenly, and what a rare good fortune it is to be supported during a whole life by such a friend as he is. That is what you have missed, Raoul. A friend, cried Raoul. I have wanted a friend. M. de Guiche is an agreeable companion, resumed the Count coldly, but I believe, in the times in which you live, men are more engaged in their own interests and their own pleasures than they were in ours. You have sought a secluded life. That is a great happiness, but you have lost your strength thereby. We four, more weaned from those delicate abstractions that constitute your joy, furnish much more resistance when misfortune presented itself. I have not interrupted you, monsieur, to tell you that I had a friend, and that friend is M. de Guiche. Certes, he is good and generous, and moreover he loves me. But I have lived under the guardianship of another friendship, monsieur, as precious and as strong as that of which you speak, since it is yours. I have not been a friend for you, Raoul, said Athos. Monsieur, and in what respect not? Because I have given you reason to think that life has but one phase, because, sad and severe, alas, I have always cut off for you, without, God knows, wishing to do so, the joyous buds that spring incessantly from the fair tree of youth, so that at this moment I repent of not having made of you a more expansive, dissipated, animated man. I know why you say that, monsieur. No, it is not you who have made me what I am. It was love which took me at the time when children only have inclinations. It is a constancy natural to my character, which with other creatures is but habit. I believe that I should always be as I was. I thought God had cast me in a path quite clear, quite straight, bordered with fruits and flowers. I had ever watching over me your vigilance and strength. I believed myself to be vigilant and strong. Nothing prepared me. I fell once, and that once deprived me of courage for the whole of my life. It is quite true that I wrecked myself. Oh, no, monsieur. You are nothing in my past but happiness, in my future but hope. No, I have no reproach to make against life, such as you made it for me. I bless you, and I love you ardently. My dear Raoul, your words do me good. They prove to me that you will act a little for me in the time to come. I shall only act for you, monsieur. Raoul, what I have never hitherto done with respect to you, I will henceforward do. I will be your friend, not your father. We will live in expanding ourselves, instead of living and holding ourselves prisoners when you come back. And that will be soon, will it not? Certainly, monsieur, for such an expedition cannot last long. Soon, then, Raoul, soon, instead of living moderately on my income, I will give you the capital of my estates. It will suffice for launching you into the world till my death. And you will give me, I hope, before that time, the consolation of not seeing my race extinct. I will do all you may command, said Raoul, much agitated. It is not necessary, Raoul, that your duty as aide-de-camp should lead you into two hazardous enterprises. You have gone through your ordeal. You are known to be a true man under fire. Remember that war with Arabs is a war of snares, ambuscades, and assassinations. So it is said, monsieur. There is never much glory in falling in an ambuscade. It is a death which always implies a little rashness or want of foresight. Often, indeed, he who falls in one meets with but little pity. Those who are not pitied, Raoul, have died to little purpose. Still further, the conqueror laughs, and we Frenchmen ought not to allow stupid infidels to triumph over our faults. Do you clearly understand what I am saying to you, Raoul? God forbid I should encourage you to avoid encounters. I am naturally prudent, monsieur, and I have very good fortune, said Raoul, with a smile which chilled the heart of his poor father. For, the young man hastened to add, in 20 combats through which I have been, I have only received one scratch. There is an addition, said Athos, the climate to be dreaded. That is an ugly end, to die of fever. King St. Louis prayed God to send him an arrow or the plague, rather than the fever. Oh, monsieur, with sobriety, with reasonable exercise. I have already obtained from M. de Beaufort a promise that his dispatches shall be sent off every fortnight to France. You, as his aide-de-camp, will be charged with expediting them, and will be sure not to forget me. No, monsieur, said Raoul, almost choked with emotion. Besides, Raoul, as you are a good Christian, and I am one also, we ought to reckon upon a more special protection of God and his guardian angels. Promise me that if anything evil should happen to you, on any occasion, you will think of me at once. First and at once. Oh, yes, monsieur. And will call upon me? Instantly. You dream of me sometimes, do you not, Raoul? Every night, monsieur. During my early youth, I saw you in my dreams, calm and mild, with one hand stretched out over my head, and that it was which made me sleep so soundly, formally. We love each other too dearly, said the Count, that from this moment, in which we separate, a portion of both our souls should not travel with one the other of us, and should not dwell wherever we may dwell. Whenever you may be sad, Raoul, I feel that my heart will be dissolved in sadness, and when you smile on thinking of me, be assured you will send me, from however remote a distance, a vital scintillation of your joy. I will not promise you to be joyous, replied the young man, but you may be certain that I will never pass an hour without thinking of you, not 1 hour, I swear, unless I shall be dead. Athos could contain himself no longer. He threw his arm round the neck of his son, and held him embraced with all the power of his heart. The moon began to be now eclipsed by twilight. A golden band surrounded the horizon, announcing the approach of the day. Athos threw his cloak over the shoulders of Raoul and led him back to the city, where burdens and porters were already in motion, like a vast anthill. At the extremity of the plateau which Athos and Bragelonne were quitting, they saw a dark shadow moving uneasily backwards and forwards, as if in indecision or ashamed to be seen. It was Grimaud, who in his anxiety had tracked his master, and was there awaiting him. "Oh, my good Grimaud," cried Raoul, "what do you want? You are come to tell us it is time to be gone, have you not?" "Alone?" said Grimaud, addressing Athos and pointing to Raoul in a tone of reproach, which showed to what extent the old man was troubled. "Oh, you are right," cried the Count. "No, Raoul shall not go alone, no. He shall not be left alone in a strange land without some friendly hand to support him, some friendly heart to recall to him all he loved." "I," said Grimaud. "You, yes, you," cried Raoul, touched to the inmost heart. "Alas," said Athos, "you are very old, my good Grimaud." "So much the better," replied the latter, with an inexpressible depth of feeling and intelligence. "But the embarkation is begun," said Raoul, "and you are not prepared." "Yes," said Grimaud, showing the keys of his trunks, mixed with those of his young master. "But," again objected Raoul, "you cannot leave Monsieur le Comte thus alone, Monsieur le Comte, whom you have never quitted?" Grimaud turned his diamond eyes upon Athos and Raoul, as if to measure the strength of both. The Comte uttered not a word. "Monsieur le Comte prefers my going," said Grimaud. "I do," said Athos, by an inclination of the head. At that moment the drums suddenly rolled, and the clarions filled the air with their inspiring notes. The regiments destined for the expedition began to debouch from the city. They advanced to the number of 5, each composed of 40 companies. Royals marched first, distinguished by their white uniform, faced with blue. The ordonnance colors, quartered crosswise violet and dead leaf, with a sprinkling of golden fleurs-de-lis, left the white color flag, with its fleur-de-lis cross, to dominate the whole. Musketeers at the wings, with their forked sticks and their muskets on their shoulders. Pikemen in the center, with their lances, 14 feet in length, marched gaily towards the transports, which carried them in detail to the ships. The regiments of Picardy, Navarre, Normandy, and Royal Vaisseau followed after. M. de Beaufort had known well how to select his troops. He himself was seen closing the march with his staff. It would take a full hour before he could reach the sea. Raoul with Athos turned his steps slowly toward the beach, in order to take his place when the prince embarked. Grimaud, boiling with the ardor of a young man, superintended the embarkation of Raoul's baggage in the admiral's vessel. Athos, with his arm passed through that of the son he was about to lose, absorbed in melancholy meditation, was deaf to every noise around him. An officer came quickly towards him to inform Raoul that M. de Beaufort was anxious to have him by his side. "Have the kindness to tell the prince," said Raoul, "that I request he will allow me this hour to enjoy the company of my father." "No, no," said Athos. "An aide-de-camp ought not thus to quit his general. Please to tell the prince, monsieur, that the Vicomte will join him immediately." The officer set off at a gallop. "Whether we part here or part there," added the Comte, "it is no less a separation." He carefully brushed the dust from his son's coat and passed his hand over his hair as they walked along. "But, Raoul," said he, "you want money? De Beaufort's train will be splendid, and I am certain it will be agreeable to you to purchase horses and arms, which are very dear things in Africa. Now, as you are not actually in the service of the king or M. de Beaufort, and are simply a volunteer, you must not reckon upon either pay or largesse. But I should not like you to want for anything at Gigelli. Here are 200 pistoles. If you would please me, Raoul, spend them." Raoul pressed the hand of his father, and at the turning of a street, they saw M. de Beaufort mounted on a magnificent white jennet, which responded by graceful curvets to the applause of the women of the city. The Duke called Raoul and held out his hand to the Comte. He spoke to him for some time, with such a kindly expression that the heart of the poor father even felt a little comforted. It was, however, evident to both father and son that their walk amounted to nothing less than a punishment. There was a terrible moment, that at which, on quitting the sands of the shore, the soldiers and sailors exchanged the last kisses with their families and friends, a supreme moment, in which, notwithstanding the clearness of the heavens, the warmth of the sun, of the perfumes of the air, and the rich life that was circulating in their veins, everything appeared black, everything bitter, everything created doubts of Providence, nay, at the most, of God. It was customary for the admiral and his suite to embark last. The cannon waited to announce, with his formidable voice, that the leader had placed his foot on board his vessel. Athos, forgetful of both the admiral and the fleet, and of his own dignity as a strong man, opened his arms to his son, and pressed him convulsively to his heart. "Accompany us on board," said the Duke, very much affected. "You will gain a good half-hour." "No," said Athos. "My farewell has been spoken. I do not wish to voice a second." "Then, Vicomte, embark! Embark quickly!" added the prince, wishing to spare the tears of these two men, whose hearts were bursting. And paternally, tenderly, very much as Porthos might have done, he took Raoul in his arms and placed in the boat, the oars of which, at a signal, immediately were dipped in the waves. He himself, forgetful of ceremony, jumped into his boat and pushed it off with a vigorous foot. "Adieu!" cried Raoul. Athos replied only by a sign, but he felt something burning on his hand. It was a respectful kiss of Grimaud, the last farewell of the faithful dog. This kiss given, Grimaud jumped from the step of the mole upon the stem of a 2-oared yawl, which had just been taken in tow by a chaland served by 12 galley oars. Athos seated himself on the mole, stunned, deaf, abandoned. Every instant took from him one of the features, one of the shades of the pale face of his son. With his arms hanging down, his eyes fixed, his mouth open, he remained confounded with Raoul, in one same look, in one same thought, in one same stupor. The sea, by degrees, carried away boats and faces to that distance at which men become nothing but points, loves, nothing but remembrances. Athos saw his son ascend the ladder of the admiral's ship. He saw him lean upon the rail of the deck, and place himself in such a manner as to be always an object in the eye of his father. In vain the cannon thundered, in vain from the ship sounded the long and lordly tumult, responded by immense acclamations from the shore. In vain did the noise deafen the ear of the father. The smoke obscured the cherished object of his aspirations. Raoul appeared to him to the last moment, and the imperceptible atom, passing from black to pale, from pale to white, from white to nothing, disappeared for Athos, disappeared very long after, to all the eyes of the spectators, had disappeared both gallant ships and swelling sails. Towards midday, when the sun devoured space and scarcely the tops of the mast dominated the incandescent limit of the sea, Athos perceived a soft aerial shadow rise and vanish as soon as seen. This was the smoke of a cannon, which in the Beaufort ordered to be fired as a last salute to the coast of France. The point was buried in its turn beneath the sky, and Athos returned with slow and painful step to his deserted hostelry.